This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I never thought I'd be typing this out, but I need to get it off my chest. It's been 3 weeks since that night, and I still wake up in cold sweats, still jump at shadows, still flinch when guests check in with baseball caps pulled low. My therapist says writing it down might help. So here goes. I've been working as a night auditor at the Roadside Haven Inn for almost 2 years now. It's a decent job, quiet most nights, decent pay, and I get to study for my online classes during the slow hours. The hotel isn't fancy, just your standard 2-story roadside place off Highway 16, about 15 minutes from downtown. Mostly we get business travelers, couples on road trips, and the occasional family needing a place to crash. That Tuesday night started like any other. I arrived for my 11 p.m. shift, grabbed a coffee from the lobby machine, it's terrible but free, and settled in behind the front desk. Maria, the evening shift girl, was eager to leave as usual. "Slow night," she said, gathering her purse. "Just 3 check-ins left on the system. Room service closes in 20 minutes if you want to order something." I nodded, already pulling up the night audit spreadsheets on the ancient desktop computer. The lobby was empty except for an older guy reading a newspaper in one of the worn armchairs. Maria left, and I dove into my routine, checking the day's transactions, preparing reports, all the boring stuff that keeps a hotel running. Around midnight, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Patel from room 118 complaining about the AC. I made a maintenance note and promised someone would look at it first thing in the morning. Then I grabbed my thermos and refilled my coffee, knowing I needed to stay alert for the next 7 hours. That's when he walked in. The automatic doors slid open, and this guy stepped inside, bringing with him a gust of cold night air. Average height, maybe 5'10", black jacket zipped all the way up despite it being pretty mild outside. He had a baseball cap pulled low, but I could see his face when he glanced up. Mid-30s, stubbled jaw, tired eyes. Nothing special about him, really, except for a jagged scar running down his left cheek. Something about him made me uneasy right away. I've worked nights long enough to develop a sixth sense about people. This guy was tense, his movements too controlled, like someone trying very hard to appear normal. "Need a room for the night," he said, keeping his eyes on the counter between us. I nodded, clicking into our reservation system. "Sure thing. Just need a credit card and ID." He hesitated for just a fraction of a second before pulling out his wallet. As he reached across, his jacket sleeve rode up, and I caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his right forearm. Looked like some kind of tribal design with red accents. He slid a driver's license and credit card across the counter. James Mercer, the license read. I typed the info into our system while he drummed his fingers on the counter. My gaze lingered on his hands. They were rough, workers' hands, but clean. Too clean, like someone who'd just scrubbed them raw. "Just passing through?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah." One-word answer, no elaboration. I printed out his registration card and spun it around for him to sign. "Room 215, 2nd floor, elevators to your right. Breakfast starts at 6. He nodded, scribbled something that barely resembled a signature, and took the key card I offered. As he walked away, I noticed he carried only a small duffel bag. No luggage cart needed. Traveling light. The elevator doors closed behind him, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Something felt off. Really off. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to the guy, James Mercer. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. The scar, though, that's what was nagging at me. I'd seen it somewhere before. Around 1 a.m., I took my usual break to eat the sandwich I'd packed. I scrolled through my phone while I ate, checking social media, news, the usual stuff. That's when I saw it. A news article about a manhunt for a suspected serial killer responsible for 3 murders across 2 states. The authorities had identified him as Jason Mercer, 34, considered armed and extremely dangerous. The article described him as average height, with a distinctive scar on his left cheek and a tribal tattoo on his right arm. My sandwich fell from my suddenly numb fingers. The photo in the article was grainy, a security camera still. But even with the poor quality, I knew it was him, the guy in room 215. The scar was identical, running from just under his eye down to his jawline. Maybe it's a coincidence, I told myself. James, Jason, similar names, sure, but common enough. Lots of people have scars and tattoos. But deep down, I knew. My hand started shaking so bad I had to put my phone down. I pulled up his registration info again. James Mercer. The address listed was in Oregon. The article said the killer's last known location was Northern California, moving north. The timing fit. He'd paid with a credit card, which seemed stupid for someone on the run. But then again, if it was stolen. I sat there frozen, trying to figure out what to do. Call the cops? But what if I was wrong? The hotel would be pissed if I called in a SWAT team on a paying guest who turned out to be innocent. I could lose my job, but if I was right, I decided to look closer. Our security system is basic but functional. I pulled up the camera feed. We have cameras at all entrances, the parking lot and the hallways, but not good enough to see faces clearly at night. Still, I could see a figure moving in the second-floor hallway. Room 215 was at the far end, away from the elevator, near the emergency stairs. As I watched, he came out of his room and walked quickly toward the stairwell, not the elevator. In his hand was something small. His phone, maybe? He disappeared into the stairwell, which wasn't covered by cameras. My throat went dry. Why would he use the stairs at 1:30 a.m.? Where was he going? I switched to the parking lot camera and waited. A minute later, I saw him emerge from the side door. He went to a dark sedan parked far from any lights and opened the trunk. The angle was bad, but I could see him remove something and tuck it under his jacket before closing the trunk and heading back inside. My heart hammered against my ribs. What had he just retrieved? A weapon? Evidence? I thought about the 3 people he'd allegedly killed. The article hadn't gone into detail about how they died, but the word gruesome had been used. The cameras showed him re-entering the building, taking the stairs back up. I lost sight of him in the hall for a moment, then caught him again as he approached his room. Just before entering, he looked directly up at the camera. Even through the grainy footage, I felt like he was staring right at me. A cold sweat broke out across my back. The clock read 1:37 a.m. The hotel was silent. Most guests were asleep. I was alone at the front desk with a possible serial killer upstairs. I had to be smart about this. If I called the police and blurted out, "I think we have a serial killer staying here," they might not take me seriously. Or worse, if they came in with sirens blaring, he might panic and someone could get hurt. I reached for the phone and dialed 911, keeping my eyes on the security monitor. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. I kept my voice low. Hi, I'm the night auditor at Roadside Haven Inn on Highway 16. I think we might have a guest staying here who matches the description of that wanted man on the news. The killer they're looking for. My voice cracked on the last word. Can you give me more details, sir? The dispatcher's tone changed slightly. More alert now. I described what I'd seen. The scar, the tattoo, the name similarity. I told her about him retrieving something from his car. As I spoke, I kept scanning the security feeds, terrified I'd see him coming toward the lobby. "Are you in a safe location right now?" she asked. "I'm at the front desk. He's on the second floor, room 215. I'm dispatching officers now. They'll approach quietly, no sirens. Stay on the line with me. Is there somewhere more secure you can wait?" I glanced around. The office behind me had a lock, but it also had no visibility to the lobby. "Not really. I can see the elevators and main entrance from here." "Okay. Officers are on their way. Estimated arrival time is 7 minutes. Can you tell me how many other guests are in the hotel tonight?" I pulled up the occupancy report. 23 rooms occupied. Probably around 30 to 40 people total. "Is there any way to quietly evacuate people near his room?" "No. I can't leave the desk, and if I start calling rooms, he might hear about it." "Understood. Stay where you are. Officers will handle the evacuation if necessary." Those 7 minutes were the longest of my life. I kept expecting to see him step out of the elevator, to see that he somehow knew I was onto him. My mouth was dry, and I couldn't stop my leg from bouncing nervously under the desk. At 1:44 a.m., I saw headlights in the parking lot. 2 police cruisers pulled in, lights off, and parked near the entrance. 4 officers got out, moving with purpose, but not running. "The police are here," I whispered into the phone. "Good. They'll come to you first for information. Stay calm." The officers entered the lobby, and I waved them over, still holding the phone. I hung up after quickly thanking the dispatcher. The lead officer, a tall woman with her hair pulled back tight, asked me to confirm everything I'd told 911. I showed them the news article on my phone, then pulled up his registration information and the security footage of him going to his car. "Room 215, you said?" She looked at the hotel layout I showed her. "Second floor, far end. Any other exits besides the main stairs and elevator?" "Emergency stairwell at the end of his hallway. It leads outside to the east side of the building." She nodded and turned to her colleagues. "Johnson and Perez cover the emergency exit. Davis, you're with me. We'll approach the room directly." She looked back at me. "Stay here. Lock yourself in the office if anything happens." They moved with a coordinated efficiency that both reassured and terrified me. 2 officers left immediately to cover the emergency exit, while the lead officer and her partner headed for the elevator. I watched on the security cameras as they reached the second floor. They drew their weapons as they approached room 215. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The lead officer knocked on the door. "Police, open up!" No response. She knocked again, louder. "Police, we're coming in!" They had a key card I'd given them. The female officer slid it in while her partner stood ready. The door opened and they entered, guns raised. I held my breath, staring at the monitor, waiting for, I don't know what. Gunshots, screaming, but there was nothing. After what felt like forever, I saw the lead officer emerge from the room and speak into her radio. The 2 officers who had been guarding the emergency exit began moving, heading outside quickly. My desk phone rang, making me jump. It was the lead officer. "Room's empty," she said, her voice tense. "But his things are still here. He can't have gone far. Stay inside the office and lock the door. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my cell phone and coffee. Stupid, I know, but I did it automatically, and hurried into the back office, locking the door behind me. Through the small window in the door, I could still see part of the lobby. Time crawled by. I heard sirens now, more police arriving. I saw flashing lights reflecting in the lobby windows. My phone buzzed with a text from my manager. "What's happening?" "Police called me." I was typing a response when I heard it, a soft clicking sound from the back door of the office, the door that led to the storage area, a door that should have been locked. I froze, fingers hovering over my phone screen. The handle turned slowly, silently. The door opened a crack, and I saw an eye peer through, and then I saw the scar. He pushed the door open further. In his hand was a hunting knife, the blade catching the fluorescent light. "You shouldn't have recognized me," he said quietly. His voice was eerily calm. "I just needed one night to rest before moving on." I backed away, bumping into the desk. My phone clattered to the floor. I was trapped between him and the locked door to the lobby. "Please," I managed to say. "There are police everywhere." "I know." He glanced at the small office window. "They're searching the grounds, but they didn't check the storage area connected to the laundry room. Amateur mistake." His eyes were cold, calculating. "I just need your key card to get to my car." "Take it," I said, pulling the master key from my pocket with trembling fingers. I held it out, praying he'd just take it and go. He stepped forward, knife still raised, and reached for the key. That's when the lobby door handle rattled. Someone was trying to get in. He froze, eyes darting to the door. I heard a voice call out, "Max, you in there? Open up." It was one of the officers. They'd come back. In that split second of distraction, I did the only thing I could think of. I threw my scalding hot coffee directly at his face. He recoiled with a hiss of pain, knife slashing wildly. I felt a burning line across my forearm as I lunged past him toward the storage door. I slammed into the hallway beyond, screaming at the top of my lungs, "Help! Police! He's here!" I heard the office door burst open behind me, shouts of, "Police! Drop the weapon!" followed by what sounded like a scuffle. I didn't stop running until I reached the laundry room. I hit the emergency exit there, setting off the alarm, and tumbled outside into the cool night air and right into the arms of an officer. "He's inside," I gasped. "Back office." Everything after that is a blur. More officers rushed in. I was led to an ambulance where they bandaged the cut on my arm. 12 stitches, turns out. I gave statement after statement, identified him in photos. It was him, Jason Mercer. The knife he had was linked to the previous murders. In the trunk of his car they found evidence. Evidence I don't want to think about, much less describe. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm staying with my parents now, looking for a new job that doesn't involve night shifts or hotels. I keep checking the locks on the doors and windows, keep seeing his cold eyes when I try to sleep. The police said I helped catch a killer, that I probably saved lives. They called me a hero on the local news. But I don't feel like a hero. I feel lucky. Lucky that officer came back when he did. Lucky my coffee was still hot. Lucky the cut wasn't deeper. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't recognized him, if I'd just processed his check-in like any other guest. Would he have just slept and left in the morning? Or was someone else in that hotel marked as his next victim? I don't know. I don't want to know. All I know is that I can't unsee his face, can't unfeel that moment when I realized who he was. Can't stop thinking about how thin the line is between an ordinary night and a nightmare. Sometimes I wonder if he knew I recognized him, if he saw something in my face, in my behavior, if he was watching me the whole time I thought I was watching him. The trial starts next month. They say I'll have to testify. I don't know how I'll face him again, but I will. I have to. But one thing's for sure, I'm never working the night shift again. I've been a hotel manager for over 12 years now. You see all kinds of weird stuff working in hospitality, especially at night. Drunk guests losing their room keys, couples fighting in the hallways, the occasional sleepwalker. I thought I'd seen it all. What happened last month at the Oakwood Hotel where I work has completely destroyed my sense of reality. I haven't slept properly since, and I keep going over everything in my head, trying to make sense of it. I need to write this down. Maybe someone out there has experienced something similar. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:30 p.m. I was covering the front desk because Sarah, our night clerk, called in sick at the last minute. The lobby was empty except for me. We're not a huge hotel, just 64 rooms across 4 floors, but we pride ourselves on being upscale and professional, the kind of place business travelers stay when they want peace and quiet. I was about to do a quick walkthrough of the first floor when the front doors slid open. In walked this completely ordinary-looking middle-aged guy wearing a gray suit, carrying a small black roller suitcase and a laptop bag. Nothing remarkable about him whatsoever. Average height, brown hair just starting to gray at the temples, clean-shaven. If you asked me to pick him out of a lineup today, I honestly don't know if I could. He approached the desk and placed his credit card down. "Reservation for Smith," he said. His voice was forgettable too. Not deep, not high, just normal. I pulled up his booking on the system. "Mr. John Smith, just one night, checking out tomorrow at 11 a.m. He nodded and drummed his fingers lightly on the counter while I processed his payment and activated his key card. I remember thinking it was odd that his reservation had been made just 2 hours earlier. Last-minute business trip, I figured. "You're in room 318, I told him, handing over the key card. "Elevators are to your right. Breakfast is served from 6:30 to 10 a.m. in the dining area." He thanked me, took his key, and wheeled his suitcase toward the elevators. I watched him step inside, press a button, and then the doors closed. That was the last time I saw Mr. Smith. The rest of my shift was uneventful. I did my walkthrough, checked on a few maintenance issues, and handed over to the morning staff at 7 a.m. before heading home for some sleep. I came back for my regular 3 p.m. shift the next day. Lisa, the day manager, immediately pulled me aside with a concerned look on her face. "James, did you check in a Mr. Smith last night to room 318? I nodded, stifling a yawn. "Yeah, around 11:30. What's up?" "Housekeeping says the room is empty. They went to clean it after checkout time, but there's no evidence anyone stayed there at all. Bed wasn't slept in, towels untouched, no personal items." My first thought was that he'd checked out super early and just hadn't used anything in the room. Some guests are like that. They crash on top of the bed covers in their clothes and leave at dawn. "Did he check out this morning?" I asked. Lisa shook her head. "That's the thing. There's no record of him checking out. Ashley was at the front desk all morning and never saw him. He didn't drop off his key card either." This wasn't that unusual. Guests forget to return key cards all the time. Still, it was strange that the room hadn't been used at all. "Let me check it out," I said. I grabbed my master key and took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet except for the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner. Room 318 was at the end of the corridor, near the emergency exit stairs. I knocked first, standard procedure, and announced myself before using the master key to enter. The moment I stepped inside, I felt this weird sensation wash over me, like the air was slightly heavier than it should be. The room was immaculate. The bed was perfectly made, exactly as housekeeping would have left it the day before. The bathroom was spotless, wrapped soap still intact, towels folded neatly on the rack. No sign of the suitcase, no laptop, no indication that Mr. Smith had ever entered the room. I checked the closet, looked under the bed, even opened the minibar. Everything untouched. It was as if Mr. Smith had walked into the room and simply disappeared. Back at the front desk, I pulled up his reservation on the system. Everything looked normal. Checked in at 11:32 p.m., standard one-night stay, credit card authorization for $189 plus incidentals. The payment had gone through without issue. "This is weird," I told Lisa. "I definitely checked him in. I watched him get in the elevator." "Maybe he just left early without using anything," Lisa suggested, echoing my earlier thought. "Without any of his luggage? He had a suitcase and a laptop bag." We decided to check the security footage. Our hotel has cameras in all public areas: lobby, hallways, elevators, entrances, and exits. If Mr. Smith had left the building, we'd see it. I pulled up the security system on the office computer and went back to the previous night. There I was at the front desk, and at 11:31 p.m., Mr. Smith walked through the front doors exactly as I remembered. He checked in, took his key card, and headed for the elevator. The footage clearly showed him entering the elevator alone at 11:34 p.m. Next, I checked the third-floor hallway camera. At 11:36 p.m., Mr. Smith exited the elevator and walked down the corridor toward room 318. I watched as he stopped at his door, inserted the key card, and went inside, closing the door behind him. And then, nothing. I fast-forwarded through the footage. The hallway remained empty all night. No one entered or exited room 318. I checked the emergency stairwell cameras. Nothing. I reviewed footage from every exit in the hotel from 11:36 p.m. onward. Mr. Smith never appeared on any of them. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered, rewinding and replaying the third-floor footage. He went into the room and never came out. Lisa looked as confused as I felt. Could he have somehow slipped past the cameras? I shook my head. There's no way. Our system covers every exit, and even if he did somehow leave without being seen, where's his luggage? Why wasn't anything in the room disturbed? We decided to do a complete search of the hotel. Maybe he'd wandered into another area and had some kind of medical emergency. Lisa and I split up, checking every floor, utility closet, and public restroom. We asked the housekeeping staff if they'd seen anyone matching Mr. Smith's description. Nothing. By 5 p.m., I was starting to get seriously worried. A guest had effectively vanished inside our hotel without a trace. I decided to call the police. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. Officer Chen and Officer Reynolds listened to my story with professional skepticism. They took notes, asked questions about Mr. Smith's appearance and behavior, and if he'd seemed distressed or intoxicated, he hadn't. "Show us the footage," Officer Chen requested. I played the security video for them, pointing out Mr. Smith's arrival, check-in, and trip to his room. They watched intently as he entered room 318 and never emerged. "And you verified he's not still in the room?" Officer Reynolds asked. "Yes, I checked personally. The room is completely empty and untouched." They insisted on seeing the room for themselves. We went up to 318, and they conducted a more thorough search than I had. They looked behind the curtains, checked if any ceiling tiles were disturbed, examined the windows, which were sealed shut as part of our climate control system, and even looked inside the air conditioning unit. No signs of foul play, Officer Chen concluded. No evidence of a struggle or forced entry. "What about his personal information?" Officer Reynolds asked. "Phone number? Emergency contact?" I pulled up Mr. Smith's reservation details again. The phone number went straight to voicemail when we tried it. Just a generic automated message, not even a personalized greeting. The address he'd provided was in Boston, but a quick internet search revealed it to be a commercial office building, not a residence. The credit card was legitimate, but we couldn't access any details beyond what our payment system showed. "This is unusual," Officer Reynolds admitted. "We'll file a missing persons report and check if any John Smiths have been reported missing recently. Could be an alias, though." They took copies of the security footage and Mr. Smith's reservation details. Before leaving, Officer Chen gave me a strange look. "In all my years on the force, I've never seen someone just vanish like this. Keep us posted if he turns up or if you remember anything else." After they left, I couldn't shake this growing sense of dread. I kept going back to the footage, watching it over and over. The more I watched Mr. Smith walk down that hallway and enter room 318, the more unsettled I felt. There was something not quite right about the way he moved. Smooth, almost gliding. Had I just not noticed that the night before because I was tired? That evening, I decided to stay after my shift ended at 11 p.m. I wanted to sit in room 318 and see if I could, I don't know, sense anything. It sounds stupid now, but I was desperate for some kind of explanation. The room felt cold when I entered, colder than the hallway outside, despite our standardized climate control. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking around at the generic hotel artwork, the desk, the TV. Nothing out of the ordinary, yet something felt off. "What happened to you, Mr. Smith?" I said aloud, surprised by how shaky my voice sounded in the empty room. As I sat there, I began to notice small things. The digital clock on the nightstand was blinking, as if it had lost power momentarily. The shower was dripping slightly, even though maintenance had checked all the rooms for leaks just last week. And there was this smell, faint but distinct, like ozone, the way the air smells after a lightning strike. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I got up and left, locking the door behind me. As I walked down the hallway toward the elevator, I glanced back at room 318. For a split second, and I swear I'm not making this up, I thought I saw a shadow move under the door. But when I blinked, it was gone. The next day, I called the police for an update. They had nothing. No missing persons reports matching Mr. Smith's description. No hits on the credit card beyond our hotel charge. It was as if he didn't exist. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with the mystery. I researched the hotel's history, wondering if there had been any similar incidents or if the building had a past I wasn't aware of. The Oakwood was only 15 years old, built on what used to be a small office park. No reported deaths, no construction accidents, nothing remotely unusual in its short history. I even contacted the credit card company directly, trying to get more information about the cardholder. They couldn't tell me much due to privacy laws, but the customer service representative did mention something odd. The account had been opened just 3 days before Mr. Smith checked in and was closed the day after. When I pressed for more details, she said she wasn't authorized to share anything else. A week after Mr. Smith's disappearance, we had to rent out room 318 again. We couldn't just keep it empty indefinitely. The first guest to stay there after Mr. Smith was a middle-aged woman on a business trip. She checked out after just one night, even though she'd booked for 3. "I couldn't sleep," she told the front desk. "It felt like someone was watching me all night." 2 more guests reported similar experiences over the next few weeks. One man said he kept hearing what sounded like a suitcase being wheeled across the floor above him, even though room 318 is on the top guest floor with only maintenance access above it. Another guest complained that the room was freezing despite turning the heat up to maximum. We had maintenance check the heating system and insulation in the room. They found nothing wrong, but the lead technician, Mike, who's been with us for years, pulled me aside afterward. "James, I don't want to sound crazy, but that room gives me the creeps now. When I was checking the vents, my tools kept moving. I'd put a screwdriver down, turn around, and it would be someplace else. And the whole time, I felt like someone was standing right behind me." About a month after the incident, the police officially closed their investigation. With no evidence of a crime and no one filing a missing persons report, there wasn't much they could do. They labeled it an unexplained disappearance and suggested that Mr. Smith had likely used a false identity for some unknown reason. But that doesn't explain how he vanished from a sealed room without using any exit. It doesn't explain why none of his belongings were left behind. And it certainly doesn't explain what happened in room 318 that night. I've developed this habit now of watching the security footage from the third floor whenever I'm on shift. Sometimes late at night when the hotel is quiet, I swear I can see a shadow moving outside room 318, just at the edge of the camera's view. But when I look at the recorded footage later, there's nothing there. Last week, I was doing a late-night walkthrough when the lights in the third-floor hallway flickered. As I approached room 318, I heard what sounded like muffled voices inside, even though the room was vacant that night. I stood outside the door, key card in hand, trying to work up the courage to go in. Just as I was about to insert the card, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. The distinct roll of wheels on carpet, like someone pulling a suitcase. I backed away from the door and left the hallway as quickly as I could. I don't know what happened to Mr. Smith. I don't know if he was some kind of elaborate con artist who found a way to bypass our security, or if he experienced something beyond our understanding inside that room. All I know is that sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see him walking down that hallway, entering room 318, and never coming out. And I can't help but wonder if someday I'll walk into that room and disappear too. The police have given up. My staff thinks I'm becoming paranoid, but I know what I saw, or rather what I didn't see. A man entered a room in my hotel and vanished into thin air, and somehow I feel like he's still here, waiting for something, or someone. I don't have answers. I just have this gnawing fear that maybe Mr. Smith discovered something in room 318, something not meant to be found. And whatever it was, it took him somewhere I hope I never have to go. I still can't shake what happened to us in Pinecrest Forest last summer. It's been 8 months, and I jump at every twig snap when I'm outside. Maybe writing this down will help, though I doubt it. Me, Lydia, and Jason had been planning this camping trip since winter. We were all burned out from our jobs in the city. Jason coding 70-hour weeks at some startup, Lydia dealing with hospital shifts, and me stuck in an accounting office, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. We needed trees, fresh air, stars, something real. Pinecrest seemed perfect. It was about 4 hours from the city, remote enough to feel like we'd actually escaped, but with established trails and camping areas. We weren't exactly wilderness experts. Jason had done some hiking in college, Lydia went camping with her family as a kid, and I'd watched enough survival shows to know the basics. Or so I thought. We arrived around noon on Saturday. The parking area was nearly empty, just a couple of trucks, which surprised me for August. The ranger station had a sign saying they were short-staffed and to register online, which we'd already done. We shouldered our packs and headed out, planning to hike about 5 miles in to one of the primitive camping areas near Blackwater Creek. The first weird thing happened about 2 miles in. We found a deer carcass just off the trail. Not that unusual in itself, but it had been processed. The hide was gone, the meat carefully removed. No scavenging marks from animals. Someone had hunted and butchered it with precision. Nothing was wasted. I remember Jason saying, "At least they're not wasteful," while Lydia looked uncomfortable. We reached our campsite around 4 p.m. It was beautiful, a small clearing near the creek, surrounded by massive pine trees that must have been hundreds of years old. We set up our 2 tents, gathered firewood, and started getting dinner ready. That feeling of accomplishment when you create your little home in the wilderness, it was exactly what we'd come for. That's when we first saw him. I noticed him first, a movement across the creek. At first I thought it was a deer, but then I realized it was a person. A man, dressed in what looked like handmade leather clothes, carrying what I initially thought was a walking stick, but later realized was a spear. He just stood there, watching us. "Guys," I said quietly, nodding in his direction. Jason waved and called out, "Hello there." The man didn't respond immediately. He just studied us, then slowly raised a hand in acknowledgement before turning and disappearing into the trees. "That was weird," Lydia said. "Probably just another camper," Jason replied, but I could tell he was unsettled too. We went back to setting up camp, but the encounter left me feeling watched. About an hour later, as the light was fading, he returned. This time, he approached our camp, crossing the shallow creek with practiced ease. Up close, he was even more striking. Tall and lean, with a thick beard streaked with gray. His skin was deeply tanned and weathered. He carried several rabbits tied to his belt. His eyes were the most intense blue I've ever seen, constantly moving, taking in everything. "You're a long way from the trail," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "We're at the Blackwater Creek site," Jason said, gesturing to our camping permit hanging from a tree, as required by park rules. The man glanced at it dismissively. "Paper doesn't mean much out here." He introduced himself as Ezra, said he lived nearby. When Lydia asked if he meant he was camping too, he just smiled slightly and said he'd been living in Pinecrest for almost 7 years. 7 years, in the forest. My mind immediately went to those shows like Alone or documentaries about off-grid living. Jason must have had the same thought because he started asking Ezra about how he survived out here. That's when Ezra seemed to open up a bit. He showed us the rabbits he'd snared, talked about the edible plants in the area, pointed out the shelter he'd built about half a mile away, though we couldn't see it from our camp. He knew an impressive amount about the forest. I'll admit, at first I was fascinated. He accepted our offer to share our fire and even contributed 2 of his rabbits to our dinner. He showed us how to properly skin and clean them. I'd never done anything like that before, and I felt a weird mix of disgust and pride when I managed to help. The conversation over dinner started normal enough. We talked about why we were camping, and he asked questions about the city. But the more he talked, the more I noticed something off about him. He kept asking about security systems, about police response times. He wanted to know if our apartments had doormen or if we lived in buildings with multiple exits. Lydia tried changing the subject, asking how he'd ended up living in the forest. His answer chilled me. "The world's going to collapse," he said, completely matter of fact. "Cities will be death traps when it happens. Out here, I'm ready. I've been practicing." "Practicing for what?" I asked, immediately regretting it. "For when people like you come looking for what I have." He said it while staring directly at me, those blue eyes reflecting the firelight. The atmosphere changed instantly. Jason tried to laugh it off, saying we were just weekend warriors who'd be back to our desk jobs on Monday. But Ezra wasn't smiling. "You say that now," he said, "but when you're hungry enough, you'll remember this place." He left shortly after, melting into the darkness so quickly it was like he'd never been there. The three of us sat in silence for a long time after he left. "That guy was intense," Jason finally said. "He's paranoid," Lydia replied. "Probably has some kind of disorder." "Should we move camp?" I asked. Neither of them wanted to pack up in the dark. Jason pointed out that Ezra had shared food with us, which wasn't exactly threatening behavior. We agreed to stay put, but to take turns keeping watch through the night. I took first shift. Nothing happened during my watch. The forest was alive with normal sounds. Insects, the occasional owl, the creek bubbling nearby. I woke Jason for his shift around 1 a.m. and crawled into the tent I was sharing with Lydia. I woke to Jason shaking me awake. "Mark, he's out there," he whispered. It was still dark. Jason said he'd seen Ezra moving around our camp, just at the edge of the firelight, watching us. He hadn't approached, just observed, then disappeared again. None of us could get back to sleep after that. We built the fire back up and sat around it, talking quietly, jumping at every forest sound. When dawn finally came, we were exhausted and on edge. "Let's just pack up and go," Lydia said. "This isn't worth it." Jason and I agreed. We started breaking down camp as quickly as we could. That's when I noticed some of our stuff was missing. My multi-tool, Jason's portable charger, some of our food. Small things we might not have immediately noticed. "He was in our camp," I said, "while we were sleeping." We worked faster, constantly looking over our shoulders. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. We were almost finished packing when Ezra appeared at the edge of our camp. He was carrying his spear, and he had my multi-tool hanging from his belt. "Leaving so soon?" he asked. His tone was casual, but everything about his posture was threatening. "Yeah, we need to get back," Jason said, trying to sound normal. "Work tomorrow, you know how it is." Ezra stepped closer. "I don't think so. You're not here by accident." "What?" Lydia asked. "We're just camping." "You're scouting," Ezra said, "taking pictures, making notes, planning to come back with more people." I realized he was talking about our phones. We'd taken some photos yesterday of the campsite, the creek. "We're just taking vacation pictures, man," I said. "Delete them," he demanded. "All of them. Now." To keep the peace, we did. He watched as each of us deleted the photos from our phones. "The government sends people like you," he continued, "clean-cut, harmless-looking, but I know what you're doing." "We're not from the government," Jason said. "We're just friends on a camping trip." Ezra laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "That's exactly what they'd tell you to say." There was no reasoning with him. His reality was completely different from ours. "We're leaving now," I said, trying to sound firm. "We won't come back." "Your packs," Ezra said. "Open them." "What?" "No," Jason replied. Ezra raised his spear slightly. "Open them, or I'll open them myself." We complied. He made us dump everything out onto the ground. He went through our belongings, taking what he wanted. Jason's Swiss Army knife, Lydia's first aid kit, more of our food. When he got to my pack, he found my GPS device. "I knew it," he said, his voice rising. "Tracking device. You're marking my location." "It's just for hiking," I explained, "so we don't get lost." He smashed it against a rock. "You people are all the same," he said. "You take and take until there's nothing left." He was becoming more agitated. We needed to leave now. "We're going," I said, starting to stuff things back into my pack. "No," Ezra said. "I don't think you are." He moved with shocking speed for a man his age. Before I could react, he had grabbed Lydia by the arm, pulling her toward him, the spear at her side. "You don't get to decide when to leave," he said. "This is my territory." Jason lunged at him. I've never been so proud and terrified at the same time. Jason was a coder who'd never been in a fight in his life, but he didn't hesitate. Ezra was prepared, though. He swung the butt of his spear, catching Jason in the stomach. As Jason doubled over, Ezra brought the spear down on his back. The sickening thud as Jason hit the ground will haunt me forever. Lydia screamed and tried to pull away. I grabbed the first thing I could, a burning log from the fire, and swung it at Ezra. He dodged easily, but it made him back up, releasing Lydia. "Run!" I shouted to her. "Get Jason and run!" Ezra came at me, the spear aimed at my chest. I blocked with the burning log, feeling splinters drive into my hands. He was stronger than he looked, pushing me back step by step. Lydia had helped Jason to his feet. They were moving toward the trail. Ezra saw them and changed direction, going after them instead of me. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the burning log. It hit him between the shoulder blades, catching his homemade leather clothes on fire. He screamed, dropping the spear to try to put out the flames. I grabbed our packs, leaving everything else behind, and ran to Jason and Lydia. Jason was hunched over but moving. We ran. Behind us, Ezra's screams turned to rage. "I'll find you," he shouted. "This is my forest. I know every inch." We ran like we never had before. Jason was hurting bad. Ezra had cracked at least one of his ribs, but adrenaline kept him moving. We didn't follow the trail. Instead, we crashed through the underbrush, trying to make it harder for him to track us. I kept expecting to feel the spear in my back at any moment. Every time we stopped to catch our breath, I could swear I heard him moving in the trees around us. After what felt like hours, we reached the ranger station. It was still unmanned, but we used the emergency phone to call for help. When the park rangers finally arrived, we told them everything. They knew who Ezra was. Apparently, he'd been living illegally in the park for years. They'd tried to remove him multiple times, but he always disappeared before they could apprehend him. They'd had other reports of him confronting hikers, but never anything this violent. They sent a team to look for him, but they didn't find anything. Not even his shelter. He'd vanished, taking all traces of himself with him. Jason had 2 cracked ribs. My hands were burned and full of splinters. Lydia had bruises where Ezra had grabbed her. But we were alive. The rangers told us they'd increase patrols in that area, but the forest is vast, and they're understaffed. They couldn't guarantee they'd find him. I haven't been camping since. Jason says he never will again. Lydia's in therapy. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking I can hear someone moving around outside my apartment. I tell myself it's just normal city noises, that there's no way he could have followed us back, found out where we live. But then I remember how he asked about our buildings, our security systems. I check the locks twice every night now. I've installed new deadbolts. I keep the blinds closed. Because the worst part isn't what happened. It's knowing that he's still out there, watching, waiting, convinced that we're his enemies. And sometimes, when I see news about climate change or political unrest or any of the 1,000 problems facing our world, a small voice in the back of my mind wonders, what if Ezra was right? What if he's the sane one, and the rest of us are just pretending everything's going to be okay? That's what really keeps me up at night. I still wake up in cold sweats some nights. It's been 6 months since our camping trip to Clearwater Lake, and I can't shake what happened. I've tried therapy, meditation, even hypnosis. Nothing works. My friends and I don't talk about it much anymore. We tried reporting it, but who would believe us? Something in the woods grabbed me sounds insane, even to me sometimes, and I lived through it. It was supposed to be our escape from reality. Just me, Taylor, Mia, Alex, and Jordan getting away from deadlines, bills, and the constant noise of the city. We'd been planning this trip for months, a full week at Clearwater Lake, completely off-grid. No cell service, no interruptions, just us reconnecting with nature and each other. The first couple days were exactly what we needed. We set up our campsite about half a mile from the lake shore, far enough from the other scattered campers to feel like we had our own little world. The weather was perfect. We spent our days hiking the trails, swimming in the crystal clear water, and catching up around the campfire at night. Jordan had been stressed about work for months. He's always been the high-strung one in our group, jumps at the slightest sound, gets freaked out by horror movies, the works. By our third day, he was finally starting to unwind a little. That's when Mia suggested the prank. We were sitting around the campfire after dinner. The sun had just set, and that deep blue twilight was settling in. Jordan had gone to use the bathroom, our fancy term for walking behind a tree with toilet paper and hand sanitizer. We should mess with Jordan, Mia whispered, a mischievous glint in her eye. He's finally relaxed. It would be hilarious to see him jump. I should have said no. God, I wish I had. Alex was immediately on board. Remember when we watched that documentary about bears last month? Jordan couldn't sleep for days. So what are you thinking? I asked. Bear sounds? Mia nodded eagerly. One of us could sneak into the woods and make some growling noises, rustle the bushes a bit. Nothing too intense, just enough to get a reaction. It seemed so harmless at the time, a stupid, childish prank between friends. We quickly assigned roles. I would be the bear, making the noises from the woods. Mia would stay at camp with Jordan, acting normal until the prank started, then pretend to be scared. Alex would follow at a distance to watch Jordan's reaction and signal me when to stop if it went too far. We heard Jordan heading back and quickly ended our plotting. The rest of the evening passed normally. We roasted marshmallows, shared a few beers, told stupid stories. Around 11 p.m., I made my excuse to leave camp. I'm going to grab something from my backpack in the tent, I said casually, then walked away from the fire. Instead of going to the tent, I circled around and slipped into the woods about 50 yards from our camp. I could still see the orange glow of our fire through the trees and make out the silhouettes of my friends. The forest was different at night. During the day, it had been welcoming and peaceful. Now it felt oppressive. The trees were just dark shapes against a darker sky. Every few feet I'd step on a twig or brush against a branch, and the sound seemed to echo forever. I pushed away my unease. I was only about 50 yards from my friends after all. I settled into position behind a thick oak tree. Perfect view of camp, good cover, and enough branches and undergrowth nearby to make convincing rustling sounds. I waited for Alex's signal, a quick flash of his phone flashlight in my direction. After about 5 minutes, I saw the flash. Time to be a bear. I started off subtle, just some light rustling in the bushes, snapping a few twigs underfoot. I could see Jordan turning his head toward the sound, but he didn't seem particularly alarmed yet. I increased the volume, shaking branches more forcefully and adding in a low, grumbling sound from the back of my throat. From my vantage point, I could see Jordan was definitely on edge now. He was sitting up straight, nervously looking toward my position. Mia was playing her part perfectly, acting concerned but not overly frightened yet. That's when I decided to kick it up a notch. I let out what I thought was a pretty decent bear growl and thrashed more violently in the underbrush. Through the trees, I saw Jordan leap to his feet. Mia was now standing too, her hand on Jordan's arm, pretending to be scared while secretly enjoying his reaction. I was so focused on their reactions that I didn't notice anything wrong at first. The forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just an oppressive stillness that seemed to press against my ears. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I dismissed it as my own nerves getting the better of me. I was about to make one final growl when I felt it. A cold spot directly behind me, like walking past an open freezer. Then a pressure on my shoulder. At first, I thought it was Alex. Maybe he'd circled around to tell me to wrap it up. I started to turn, a smile already forming on my lips. The smile died the instant I saw Alex's face. He was about 15 feet away, staring at me with an expression of pure horror. His mouth was open in a silent scream, his flashlight beam frozen on whatever was behind me. If Alex was there, then what was touching me? The pressure on my shoulder suddenly became a vice-like grip. 5 points of pain dug into my flesh, not like fingers, more like claws. A wave of rotten, musty stench washed over me, like decaying vegetation and something metallic. Blood. My brain couldn't process what was happening. I tried to turn to see what had me, but another hand, paw, claw, clamped down on my other shoulder, holding me in place. I could feel hot breath on the back of my neck, moist, rancid, coming in rhythmic huffs. That's when I screamed. Not a fake bear growl, but a genuine shriek of terror that tore through my throat. The sound seemed to break Alex out of his frozen state. He started yelling too, backing away, his flashlight beam jerking wildly. "Help! Something's got Taylor!" he screamed toward the campsite. The thing behind me tightened its grip, and suddenly I was being pulled backward. My feet scrambled for purchase on the forest floor, but it was like being dragged by a truck. Whatever had me was incredibly strong and moving fast, pulling me deeper into the darkness of the woods. My mind was racing with fragmented thoughts. Bear? Mountain lion? But this felt wrong. The strength, the smell, the deliberate way it was dragging me away from camp. Predatory animals don't behave like this. I thrashed and kicked, trying to break free. My hand found a low-hanging branch, and I grabbed it desperately. For a moment, I stopped moving as I clung to the branch with all my strength. The thing behind me made a sound then, not a growl or a snarl, but something between a hiss and a click, like nothing I'd ever heard from any animal. The branch snapped and I was moving again. Rocks and roots tore at my back as I was dragged across the ground. I could hear my friends shouting, their voices growing fainter. The campfire was just a distant pinpoint of light now. In my panic, I managed to twist my body enough to catch a glimpse of what had me. In the darkness, I couldn't make out details, just a massive shadow, larger than a person but moving on 2 legs. Its outline seemed wrong somehow, proportions that didn't make sense, with arms too long and a head that sat awkwardly on broad shoulders. My struggling seemed to anger it. It yanked me harder, and I felt my shoulder pop. The pain was immediate and blinding. I might have blacked out for a few seconds. The next thing I knew, we were moving again, and I could no longer see any lights from our camp. The reality of my situation hit me. I was being taken away from safety, from my friends, by something I couldn't identify or reason with. This wasn't a bear or any normal predator. This was something else entirely. I don't know what made me think of it, but I remembered my pocket knife. With my good arm, I managed to reach into my pocket and pull it out. Flipping it open was almost impossible with one hand, but adrenaline is a hell of a thing. The blade clicked into place. I twisted my body and slashed blindly behind me. I felt the knife connect with something solid, followed by a high-pitched shriek that hurt my ears. The creature's grip loosened for just a second, and I scrambled forward, trying to crawl away. I didn't get far. A weight crashed down on my back, knocking the wind out of me. I felt myself being flipped over, and for the first time I was face to face with my attacker. Even now I struggle to describe what I saw. It was dark, but my eyes had adjusted enough to make out a face, if you could call it that. No fur like a bear or a distinct snout like a wolf. Just pale, almost translucent skin stretched too tight over a misshapen skull. Eyes that reflected the faint moonlight like a cat's, but larger, set too wide apart. A mouth that stretched nearly ear to ear, filled with uneven teeth. I froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. The creature lowered its face toward mine, those reflective eyes studying me with what seemed like curiosity. Its breath washed over me in hot, fetid waves. I closed my eyes, certain I was about to die. Then I heard something that made my heart leap, voices shouting my name, and the bobbing of flashlight beams through the trees. My friends hadn't abandoned me. The creature's head snapped up, its attention drawn to the approaching lights and voices. It made that strange clicking sound again, louder this time, almost agitated. The weight on my chest shifted as it seemed to consider its options. The flashlight beams were getting closer. I could hear Mia calling my name, her voice cracking with panic. Jordan and Alex were shouting too, and I realized they were making as much noise as possible, banging pots together, blowing a whistle we'd brought for emergencies. The creature released a sound that was almost a growl, but layered with something else, a vibration I could feel in my chest more than hear. Then, in one fluid motion, it was off me, and moving through the forest with shocking speed, branches cracking in its wake. I lay there, gasping for breath, too terrified to move. Seconds later, my friends burst through the trees. Mia reached me first, falling to her knees beside me, her hands hovering over me as if afraid to touch me. "Taylor! Oh my God, Taylor! Are you okay?" Her voice sounded far away, like I was underwater. Alex and Jordan formed a protective circle around us, their flashlights scanning the darkness, the campsite's cooking pot in Jordan's white-knuckled grip, and a burning branch from the fire in Alex's hand. "What was that thing?" Alex's voice was shaking. I saw it grab you." I couldn't answer. My body was starting to react to the trauma, uncontrollable shaking, teeth chattering, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin despite the warm night. "We need to get back to camp," Jordan said, his usually anxious voice now eerily calm with focus. "Can you walk, Taylor?" They helped me to my feet. My dislocated shoulder sent waves of agony through me with every movement. We moved as a tight group back toward camp, constantly checking over our shoulders, jumping at every sound. The journey seemed to take forever, though in reality it was probably only 10 minutes. Back at the campfire, they sat me down and examined my injuries. My shirt was torn, and deep scratches ran across both shoulders. 5 parallel lines, perfectly spaced, like fingers, but not quite human. My shoulder was definitely dislocated, and I had scrapes and bruises all over from being dragged across the forest floor. Mia, who had some first aid training, managed to pop my shoulder back into place. The pain was excruciating, but afterward, I could at least move my arm a little. She cleaned and bandaged the worst of the cuts, her hands steady even as tears streamed down her face. No one asked about what had happened yet. We were all too focused on survival. We built up the fire until it was blazing, creating a circle of light that felt too small against the vast darkness surrounding us. We gathered every weapon we could find: knives, heavy flashlights, a hatchet for chopping wood. Jordan even taped his knife to a long stick, creating a makeshift spear. We huddled together, backs to the fire, facing outward toward the forest. No one suggested trying to leave in the dark. The thought of stumbling through those woods with that thing out there was unthinkable. "I can see it," Alex whispered after about an hour of tense silence. He nodded toward a spot between two trees about 30 yards from camp. I followed his gaze and felt my blood turn to ice. Two reflective eyes, much larger than any animal's should be, hovered in the darkness just beyond the firelight's reach. They blinked slowly, deliberately. "I see it too," Mia breathed, pointing to a different spot in the tree line. Another pair of eyes, same height, same distance apart. "There's another," Jordan's voice cracked as he pointed to yet another location. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Were there multiple creatures out there, or was it so fast it could move between positions before we could track it? Throughout that endless night, those eyes appeared and disappeared at different points around our camp. Sometimes we'd hear branches breaking in the distance, or that strange clicking sound echoing through the trees. Occasionally, a low, vibrating hum would emanate from the darkness, making the hair on our arms stand up, but it never approached the firelight. That seemed to be our only advantage. It didn't want to come near the flames. When the first light of dawn finally broke through the trees, the eyes were gone. We waited another hour until the sun was fully up before we dared to move from our positions. My whole body was stiff from tension and fear, my injuries throbbing with each heartbeat. No one needed to say it. We were getting the hell out of there. We packed up camp in record time, leaving behind anything non-essential. The whole time, we kept looking over our shoulders, jumping at every sound. Even in daylight, the forest felt threatening now, hiding secrets in its shadows. The hike back to our cars was torture. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every bird call sent spikes of terror through me. My dislocated shoulder, though back in place, burned with pain with each step. But fear is a powerful motivator. We made it back to the parking lot in half the time it had taken us to hike in. As we threw our gear into the cars, a park ranger pulled up alongside us. He must have noticed our frantic movements and disheveled appearance. "Everything okay, folks?" he asked, eyeing my makeshift bandages and our wild-eyed expressions. We looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. Who would believe what we'd experienced? "Just cutting our trip short," Alex replied. "Taylor took a bad fall, hurt their shoulder. We think it might need proper medical attention." The ranger nodded sympathetically. "Smart move. Better safe than sorry. Did you run into any wildlife trouble out there?" I couldn't help but laugh, a slightly hysterical sound that made the ranger's eyebrows rise. "You could say that," Mia muttered. The ranger looked like he wanted to ask more questions, but we were already getting into our cars. As we pulled away, I caught him staring after us with a puzzled expression. At the hospital, I told the doctors I'd fallen down a steep embankment while hiking at night. They treated my dislocated shoulder, stitched up the deeper cuts, and gave me antibiotics to prevent infection. They commented on the strange pattern of the scratches, but didn't push when I stuck to my falling story. It's been 6 months now. I still haven't fully processed what happened that night. The 4 of us have tried to research what it might have been: cryptid sightings, local legends, scientific explanations. Nothing fits. Whatever grabbed me in those woods isn't in any textbook or wildlife guide. We've made a pact never to go camping again, especially not at Clearwater Lake. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see those reflective eyes watching me from the darkness, still feel those inhuman hands gripping my shoulders, still smell that rotten breath. The worst part? I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't trying to kill me, at least not right away. It was taking me somewhere. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, sure that whatever it was is still out there, waiting for another chance to finish what it started. I've debated posting this for months now. I'm still not sure if writing it down will help me process what happened or just bring back the nightmares. But I need to tell someone who might understand, and maybe putting this out there will help me make sense of it all. 6 months ago, I set out on what was supposed to be a routine 3-day solo hike in the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. I've been hiking for almost 15 years, done the Colorado Trail twice, and spent countless weekends exploring backcountry routes all over the Rockies. I'm careful, prepared, and experienced. At least, that's what I always told myself. The weather forecast looked perfect that Friday morning. Clear skies, mild temperatures, just a slight chance of afternoon showers typical for early September. I parked at the Weminuche Wilderness Trailhead around 9 a.m., double-checked my gear, and hit the trail feeling that familiar rush of excitement I always get when heading into the mountains alone. The first few hours were exactly what I'd hoped for. The aspens were just starting to turn, creating these stunning patches of gold against the deep green pines. I passed a few day hikers early on, but by early afternoon, I had the trail to myself. I remember stopping at this perfect overlook for lunch, sitting there munching on my trail mix, watching an eagle circling above the valley. Man, in moments like that, you feel like you figured out all of life's secrets, you know? My plan was to reach Bear Creek Junction by sunset, about 11 miles in. I was making good time, so I decided to explore this unmarked side trail I spotted on my map. It wasn't part of my original route, but it looked like it might loop back to the main trail while passing by a small alpine lake. According to my map, it was only about a mile detour. That decision, I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times since then. The side trail started clear enough, but gradually became less defined. It was steeper than I expected, switchbacking up through increasingly dense forest. After about 30 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen a trail marker in a while. The path was narrowing, becoming overgrown in spots. Still, I could see what looked like a trail ahead, so I kept going. Another 45 minutes passed, and I started feeling uneasy. The trail I was following had basically disappeared, and the terrain didn't match what my map showed. I stopped to check my GPS, only to discover I had no signal. No problem, I thought. I had my compass, and if I just headed east, I should intersect the main trail again. I started backtracking, trying to find where I'd lost the path. The forest had become dense, with tall pines blocking much of the light. I checked my watch, 3:45 p.m. I still had plenty of daylight, but I was now officially off my planned route. By 5 p.m., I knew I was in trouble. Nothing looked familiar. The terrain kept changing. 1 minute I was pushing through dense underbrush. The next I was scrambling up rocky slopes that definitely weren't on any trail. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows through the trees, making it hard to distinguish features in the distance. I tried climbing to higher ground to get my bearings, but the forest was so thick I couldn't see any landmarks. For the first time in years of solo hiking, I felt that initial prickle of real fear. Not just concern, but actual fear. The temperature was dropping faster than I expected, and I was nowhere near where I planned to camp. I decided to find a suitable spot to set up for the night and reorient myself in the morning. I found a small clearing as the last light was fading and quickly set up my tent. My hands were shaking slightly as I worked, not from the cold, but from a growing sense of dread I couldn't shake. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like something was watching me from the trees. I told myself it was just the stress of being lost, but that feeling, it wouldn't go away. After forcing down some food and filtering water from my reserve, I got into my sleeping bag early. I was exhausted, but too amped up to sleep. The forest was unusually quiet. No wind in the trees, no animals moving around. Just silence. I lay there staring at the ceiling of my tent, mentally calculating how far I might have wandered and planning my route for morning. That's when I heard it, a twig snapping, maybe 50 feet from my tent. At first, I figured it was just a deer or elk. The mountains are full of wildlife, and nighttime sounds are normal. But then there was another snap, closer this time, followed by the distinctive sound of footsteps. Not the random movement of an animal, but the deliberate, rhythmic footfalls of someone walking. I froze, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped, then started again, slowly circling around my tent. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I reached for my headlamp and knife, the only potential weapons I had. The footsteps continued circling, never rushing, just methodically moving around the perimeter of my clearing. "Hello?" I finally called out, my voice sounding strangled and weak. "Is someone there?" No response. The footsteps stopped. I waited, straining to hear anything. 10 seconds, 20. Then the footsteps started again, moving away from my tent into the trees. I should have been relieved, but something about those footsteps, their deliberateness, the way they paused when I spoke, left me terrified. This wasn't a random hiker who had stumbled upon my camp. This was someone watching me, stalking me. Sleep was impossible now. I lay awake, knife in hand, jumping at every sound. Around 2 a.m. I heard it again, footsteps approaching from a different direction. This time, they came right up to my tent. I could see the shadow of someone standing outside, perfectly still. I was paralyzed with fear. The shadow remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, then slowly moved away again. By the time the first hint of dawn appeared, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept at all. As soon as it was light enough to see, I packed up camp in record time, constantly scanning the trees around me. I saw nothing unusual, no footprints, no signs anyone had been there. But I knew what I'd heard. I decided to head downhill, figuring I'd eventually hit a stream that would lead to a larger river and hopefully a trail. The morning was cold and foggy, making it hard to see more than 50 feet ahead. I moved as quickly as I could through the undergrowth, constantly looking behind me. That's when I spotted something that stopped me cold. About 30 yards back, partially hidden behind a large pine, was a figure, just standing there, watching me. When our eyes met, they didn't move or try to hide. They just stared. I couldn't make out details through the fog and distance, but it was definitely a person, tall, dressed in dark clothing. Not regular hiking gear. I took off running, no longer caring about direction or trail finding. Pure survival instinct took over. I crashed through branches and stumbled over rocks, my pack slamming against my back with each step. After about 10 minutes of full-out sprinting, I had to stop, gasping for breath. I looked back. Nothing. Had I imagined it? I pushed on, moving as fast as I could while trying to maintain some sense of direction. The fog was burning off, but the forest seemed to be getting thicker. I checked my watch. 9:30 a.m. I'd been moving for hours and had no idea where I was. Then I heard it again, footsteps behind me. Not running, just walking steadily. Somehow that was more terrifying than if they had been chasing me. It was like they knew they didn't need to hurry, like they knew I had nowhere to go. I changed direction, heading up a steep slope, hoping to find a vantage point. My lungs were burning, legs shaking from exertion and fear. As I climbed, the trees thinned slightly, and I could see what looked like a clearing ahead. I broke through the tree line into a small meadow that ended abruptly at a cliff edge. Below was a stunning view of the valley, stretching for miles. Any other time, I would have stopped to appreciate it. Now, I was just desperate to spot a trail, a road, any sign of civilization. Nothing, just wilderness in every direction. I turned around, ready to find another route, and froze. There at the edge of the meadow, where I had just emerged from the trees, stood the figure. In the clear daylight, I could see them properly for the first time. It was a man, probably in his 40s, wearing dark pants and a heavy jacket that didn't look like typical hiking gear. His face was weathered, with a patchy beard, but what struck me most were his eyes, cold, calculating, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He didn't say anything, didn't move toward me, just stood there, blocking my path back to the forest. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. No response. He took one step forward. I backed up, moving closer to the cliff edge. My mind was racing. I had nowhere to go. The cliff behind me looked to be a 100-foot drop. The man took another step forward, then another. I raised my knife, though I knew it would be useless if he had a gun or even just a longer blade. "Stay back. I'm not alone. My group is expecting me." He smiled then, a smile that contained no warmth or humor, just recognition that I was lying. "Nobody knows you're here," he finally spoke, his voice rough like he wasn't used to using it. "Nobody ever comes this way." 3 more steps, and he'd reach me. I could see his hands now. He was wearing gloves, and in his right hand was something metallic that caught the sunlight. I was out of options. I could let him reach me, or I could try something desperate. I feigned moving to the right, then suddenly sprinted left, trying to circle around him back to the tree line. He was faster than I expected. He lunged, catching my pack strap and yanking me backward. I fell hard, the air knocked from my lungs. Before I could recover, he was on me, pinning me to the ground with surprising strength. The metallic object I'd seen was a hunting knife, which he now held to my throat. I could feel its cold edge against my skin. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "This mountain doesn't want you here." I was certain I was going to die. My entire body was shaking with terror. I closed my eyes, not wanting to see it coming. Then, like some miracle I still can't explain, I heard voices, multiple voices, calling out. The man heard them too. His head snapped up, looking toward the forest edge. "Jack! Jack Morrison!" They were calling my name. How was that possible? I hadn't told anyone my exact route, and I was miles off course. The man's grip on me loosened just enough. I brought my knee up hard, connecting with his stomach. He grunted in pain, and the knife sliced across my shoulder as he fell sideways. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the voices, screaming for help. I burst through the trees and nearly collided with 3 people in search and rescue uniforms. They looked as surprised to see me as I was to see them. "Jack Morrison?" "Thank God," one of them said. "Your emergency beacon has been going off for hours." My emergency beacon? I never activated it. It was still in my pack's side pocket. I tried to explain about the man, pointing back toward the meadow, blood running down my arm from the knife wound. Two of the rescuers immediately drew what looked like bear spray and headed in that direction, while the third stayed with me, applying pressure to my shoulder. They found nothing. No sign of the man, no footprints other than mine. Nothing. The rescue team got me back to civilization, where I gave a report to the local sheriff. They were sympathetic but skeptical. They explained that disorientation and fear can cause hallucinations in the backcountry, that my beacon had somehow activated in my pack, likely by accident, that the knife wound could have come from me falling on a sharp rock or branch. I know what I experienced. I know what I saw. The man was real. His knife against my throat was real. The cold in his eyes was real. I haven't been hiking since. Can't even bring myself to walk in the city park alone. I still wake up hearing those footsteps circling my tent. The thing that haunts me most? I never activated that emergency beacon. I checked it that morning before setting out. It was off and secured in its case. Someone or something turned it on. And I don't know if it was to save me or to lure me exactly where he wanted me. I don't have answers, just nightmares and a scar on my shoulder that reminds me every day that something was out there in those mountains. Something that's probably still there, waiting for the next hiker who takes a wrong turn. I've always considered myself a rational person. I don't believe in monsters under the bed or ghosts in the attic. But what happened to my family last summer at Pinewood Campground completely shattered my worldview. I still struggle to make sense of it, and I'm hoping that writing this down might help me process everything. My name is Sarah, and my husband David and I had been planning this camping trip for months. Our kids, Emma, 12, and Liam, 9, were so excited to spend time in nature, away from their iPads and video games. We live in a typical suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns and scheduled play dates, so the idea of letting the kids run wild in the forest for a week seemed like the perfect antidote to our structured lives. Pinewood Campground wasn't one of those fancy places with cabins and electricity. It was remote, about 3 hours from our home, nestled deep in national forest land. The website advertised it as a true wilderness experience, which sounded exactly like what we wanted. The campground had only 15 designated sites spread out over a large area, offering plenty of privacy. When we arrived, there were only 2 other groups camping there, an older couple in an RV near the entrance and a family with teenagers about a quarter-mile from our site. The first 2 days were honestly magical. We hiked along the creek. David taught the kids how to fish, and we collected rocks and leaves for Emma's nature journal. At night, we roasted marshmallows and told stories around the campfire. The sky was incredible. I've never seen so many stars. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, how right, like we should have been doing this all along. On the 3rd night, I woke up around 3 a.m. needing to use the bathroom. Our tent was big enough for the 4 of us with 2 sections, adults on one side, kids on the other. I carefully unzipped my sleeping bag, trying not to wake David. As I was about to unzip the tent door, I heard something outside. Footsteps, I thought, heavy ones, circling our campsite. My heart started beating faster. It could have been a deer or maybe a raccoon looking for food, but something about the deliberate nature of the sound made me freeze. I sat there in the dark, completely still, listening as whatever it was moved around our site. After about 5 minutes, the sound stopped. I was too scared to go outside, so I just crawled back into my sleeping bag and eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. When I mentioned it to David the next morning, he suggested it was probably just wildlife and reminded me that we were in their territory. I tried to convince myself he was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That fourth day was hot and humid. We spent most of it at the creek, where the kids splashed in the shallow parts, while David and I sat on the shore reading. Everything seemed normal. We had a simple dinner of hot dogs and beans, and everyone was exhausted, so we went to bed early. I remember double-checking that our food was properly stored in the bear-proof container the campground provided. David made sure everything else was secured in our car. I don't know what time it was when the screaming started. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, this high-pitched, almost inhuman wailing coming from somewhere in the forest. I sat up, disoriented. David was already awake, his hand on my arm. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. We listened, but there was nothing. Just the normal sounds of the forest at night, cricket chirps, the occasional hoot of an owl. We were about to lie back down when we heard it again, closer this time. It wasn't quite animal, wasn't quite human. It raised the hair on my arms. "Should we call someone?" I asked, reaching for my phone. David shook his head. "No service, remember? It's probably just a fox or something. They can sound weird at night." We stayed awake for at least another hour, listening, but the sound didn't return. Eventually, exhaustion took over and we fell asleep. When I opened my eyes the next morning, something felt off immediately. The tent seemed brighter than usual, and there was a strange smell in the air, earthy and metallic. I sat up and realized the tent door was wide open. I distinctly remembered zipping it closed the night before. "David!" I hissed, shaking him awake. "The tent's open." He was instantly alert, sitting up and looking toward the kids' section. Emma and Liam were still asleep, undisturbed. Relief flooded through me at the sight of them. "Maybe one of us got up in the night and forgot to close it," David suggested, but the uncertainty in his voice was clear. "I need to check outside," he said, pulling on his shoes. The moment David stepped out of the tent, I heard him gasp. "Sarah, you need to see this." I quickly put on my sneakers and followed him outside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Our entire campsite had been destroyed. The camp chairs were scattered in pieces across the clearing. Our cooler had been ripped open, its contents strewn everywhere. The plastic tub containing our dry food was missing completely. Most disturbing of all, the outside of our tent had long, jagged tears along one side, thankfully not the side where the kids were sleeping. "Was it a bear?" I whispered, looking around frantically for any sign of the animal. David shook his head slowly. "Bears don't do this. They make a mess, sure, but this..." He gestured at the campsite. "This looks deliberate." And he was right. The way our things had been scattered didn't look random. The camp chairs hadn't just been knocked over. They'd been broken apart, the metal frames twisted. Our stack of firewood had been arranged in a strange pattern on the ground. Even our car had been tampered with, all the doors left wide open, though nothing inside seemed to be missing. "Mom? Dad?" Emma's voice came from inside the tent. She and Liam appeared at the doorway, their eyes widening as they took in the destruction. "What happened?" Liam asked, his voice small and frightened. David immediately switched into dad mode, his voice calm despite the fear I could see in his eyes. "Probably just some animal looking for food, nothing to worry about. Why don't you two stay in the tent while Mom and I clean up a bit?" Once the kids were back inside, David grabbed my arm. "We need to leave," he whispered urgently. "Now." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll get the kids dressed. You start packing what you can." As I turned toward the tent, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. At the edge of our campsite, where the clearing met the dense forest, There were footprints in the soft earth. Human footprints. I pointed them out to David, who stared at them for a long moment. "Could be from another camper," he said, but we both knew that made no sense. Why would another camper come through our site in the middle of the night? We worked quickly, throwing our belongings into bags without bothering to organize anything. The kids sensed our urgency and didn't complain or ask questions. As we packed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every few seconds I'd glance toward the tree line, half expecting to see someone or something staring back at me. David was dismantling what was left of our tent when I heard it, the crack of a branch breaking somewhere in the forest behind us. I spun around, scanning the trees. Nothing moved, but the feeling of eyes on us intensified. "David," I said quietly, "I think someone's watching us." He straightened up, his eyes narrowing as he looked where I was pointing. "I don't see anything." I heard something move. He hesitated, then called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" His voice echoed back from the trees. No response. "Let's just hurry," I said, turning back to our half-packed belongings. That's when Emma screamed. She was standing near the edge of our site, pointing toward the trees. "There's someone in there! I saw them!" David rushed to her side. "Where, honey? What did you see?" "A person," she said, her voice shaking, "just standing there watching us." David stared hard into the forest, then turned to me. "Get the kids in the car, now." I grabbed Liam's hand and pulled Emma toward our SUV. "What about our stuff?" Emma protested. "We'll come back for it," I lied, knowing we would never return to this place. As I was buckling Liam into his seat, I heard David shout. I turned to see him backing away from the tree line, his face pale. "Start the car," he yelled, running toward us. Through the gaps in the trees, I caught a glimpse of movement, something dark, moving fast, not quite running, but not walking either, a strange loping gait that seemed unnatural. David jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. "What is it?" I demanded. "What did you see?" He just shook his head, finally starting the car. "We need to go, now." As we pulled away from the campsite, I looked back through the rear window. There, at the edge of our ruined campsite, stood a figure. Even from a distance, something about it seemed wrong. It was human-shaped, but somehow off, too tall, too thin, its proportions slightly askew. And though I couldn't see its face clearly, I had the terrible sense that it was smiling. "David," I whispered. "Drive faster." The car lurched forward as David pressed the accelerator, sending us bouncing down the rough camp road. In the back seat, Emma and Liam were unusually quiet, both staring out the windows with wide eyes. "It's following us," Emma suddenly said, her voice eerily calm. I twisted in my seat to look out the back window again. My heart nearly stopped. She was right. The figure was on the road behind us, moving with that same unnatural gait, but somehow keeping pace with our vehicle, though we must have been going at least 20 miles on the rough road. "Don't look at it," David said sharply. "Just don't look." We reached the main camp road and David turned right, heading toward the campground entrance. I expected to see the RV belonging to the older couple, but their site was empty. So was the one belonging to the family with teenagers. Had they left, or had something happened to them too? As we approached the camp entrance, I felt a moment of relief. Just a few more seconds, and we'd be on the main road, heading back to civilization. But then David slammed on the brakes, sending us lurching forward against our seatbelts. Blocking the exit was a fallen tree, a massive pine that definitely hadn't been there when we arrived. It completely covered the narrow road. "We'll have to move it," David said, though the trunk was clearly too large for us to shift. "No," I said, grabbing his arm as he reached for the door handle. "We can't go out there." "We have to, Sarah. It's the only way out." I looked back down the road behind us. The figure was still there, still coming, but moving slower now, almost like it was savoring the moment, knowing we were trapped. "There's another way," I said suddenly, remembering the map we'd seen at the ranger station. "There's a service road that connects to the highway. It's for emergency vehicles." David hesitated, then nodded. "Where?" "Back the way we came, then left at the fork instead of right." He threw the car into reverse, turning it around in a tight three-point turn before speeding back down the road. As we passed where the figure had been, I was horrified to see it was gone. "Where did it go?" Liam asked, his voice trembling. No one answered. We reached the fork, and David turned left onto an even rougher road, this one barely more than a trail through the trees. Branches scraped against the sides of our car as we bumped along. "Are you sure this goes through?" David asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I think so," I said, trying to remember the details from the map. We'd gone about half a mile when the car engine suddenly sputtered and died. David turned the key, but nothing happened, not even the clicking sound of a dead battery. Just silence. "No, no, no," David muttered, trying again and again. Outside, the forest was absolutely still. No birds singing, no wind in the trees, just silence. "What do we do now?" Emma asked from the back seat. Before either of us could answer, something hit the roof of the car with a heavy thud. The entire vehicle shook. Liam started crying. "It's okay," I said automatically, reaching back to touch his knee. "It's just a branch." Another thud, this one hard enough to dent the roof downward, not a branch. Then came a sound I'll never forget as long as I live. Fingernails or claws, dragging slowly across the metal roof of our car. The high-pitched scraping made my teeth hurt. "Don't move," David whispered, though none of us had any intention of going outside. The scraping stopped, and for a moment there was silence again. Then came a gentle tapping on my window. Tap, 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 like someone politely asking to be let in. Against every instinct, I turned my head to look. There was a face pressed against the glass, inches from mine. But it wasn't a human face. Not really. It had the basic features, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were all wrong. The eyes were too large, too dark, with no whites visible. The nose was just two slits, and the mouth stretched too wide across the face, filled with teeth that looked filed to points. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The thing smiled wider at my reaction, more teeth becoming visible than should be possible in a human mouth. One long-fingered hand reached up and pressed flat against the window. The fingers were jointed wrong, bending in places where human fingers don't bend. "Start the car," I begged David. "Please just try again." He turned the key, and miraculously, the engine roared to life. The thing outside my window tilted its head, almost curiously, then suddenly disappeared from view. David floored the accelerator and we shot forward, branches whipping against the windows. We drove recklessly fast down the narrow service road, bouncing violently over rocks and roots. Nobody spoke. The kids were crying quietly in the back seat. I kept expecting to see the thing appear in front of us or beside us, but there was nothing. After what seemed like forever, the trees thinned and we emerged onto a paved road, the highway. David didn't slow down, pushing our SUV well above the speed limit as we headed toward town. It wasn't until we were about 20 miles away that he finally eased off the gas, his breathing ragged. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, glancing at the rearview mirror to see the kids. They nodded silently, their faces pale. "What was that thing?" I whispered, low enough that the kids wouldn't hear. David shook his head slightly. "I don't know. I don't want to know." When we reached the nearest town, we went straight to the police station. The officer at the desk listened to our story with increasing skepticism as we described the destruction of our campsite and the figure that had chased us. "Probably just some locals messing with you," he said finally. "Kids like to scare the tourists sometimes. As for what you saw on the car," he shrugged. "Hard to see clearly when you're scared. Mind plays tricks." He took our statement anyway and said he'd send someone to check out the campground. We got a hotel room in town and spent a sleepless night, jumpy at every sound. The next day, David called the ranger station to ask about retrieving our abandoned camping gear. They told him they'd sent someone to our site and found nothing. No destroyed tent, no scattered supplies, nothing to indicate anyone had camped there at all. We never went back to get our things. We drove home the next day and tried to put the experience behind us. But sometimes at night, I still hear that tapping on my window. Tap, tap, tap. And I know, whatever was out there in those woods, it's still waiting. And somehow, I think it knows where we live. I've been a search and rescue volunteer with Ravencrest County for almost 7 years now. I've seen a lot of stuff out there that I can't explain, but what happened 3 weeks ago in Whispering Pines, I still can't talk about it without my hands shaking. For context, I'm Emily. I'm 32, and I've always loved the outdoors. I grew up hiking these mountains, so joining SAR felt natural. I know these forests better than I know the streets of my own neighborhood. At least, I thought I did. It started with a routine call. Dispatch radioed that they'd received a distress signal from a personal locator beacon in the Whispering Pines area. Female hiker, alone, no additional information. The ping was coming from deep in the backcountry, about 8 miles from the nearest access road. Not great, but not unusual either. I called up my usual team: Marcus, ex-military medic, Danny, our navigation expert, and Jake, wilderness survival instructor. We're a solid crew, been working together for years. When things go sideways out there, these are exactly the people you want beside you. We loaded up our gear at the station: standard 72-hour packs, medical supplies, extra water, thermal blankets, the usual. But as I was checking my radio, I felt this weird heaviness in my chest. I'm not superstitious, but something felt off. I brushed it aside as just being tired. I'd had a long shift the day before. We took the North Trail access road and parked at the trailhead around 2 p.m. The weather was clear, about 65 degrees. Perfect conditions. I remember looking up at the dense tree line and feeling that same uneasiness again. Whispering Pines has always been beautiful, but intimidating. Old-growth forest so thick the sunlight barely filters through in places. "Signals coming from about 7.8 miles northeast," Danny said, checking her GPS. "If we keep a good pace, we should reach her before sunset." The first hour of hiking was completely normal, birds singing, squirrels darting across the path. But then, gradually, things started to change. I noticed it first. The forest was getting quieter with each mile. By mile 3, there was nothing. No birds, no insects, just our footsteps and breathing. "Anyone else notice how quiet it is?" I asked. Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the trees. "Been thinking the same thing for the past 20 minutes. "Could be a predator in the area," Jake suggested. "Bear or mountain lion can silence a forest." That made sense, but it didn't feel right. This silence was complete, unnatural, like the forest itself was holding its breath. We pushed on, following a narrow game trail that wound deeper into the wilderness. The trees grew thicker, older, massive pines with trunks wider than cars. The canopy above blocked out more and more sunlight until we were walking in a perpetual green twilight. Around mile 5, I started feeling watched. It's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it, but it's this crawling sensation on the back of your neck, your brain screaming that eyes are on you, even when logic says there's nothing there. "Anyone else feel like we're being observed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Danny glanced over her shoulder. I was just about to ask the same thing. Even Marcus, who's usually unshakable, looked uneasy. "Let's pick up the pace. I want to find this hiker and get back to the trailhead before dark." We quickened our steps, no one wanting to admit how unsettled we all felt. The silence was oppressive now, pressing against my eardrums like I was deep underwater. Just past mile 6, our radios started acting up. First static, then complete failure. We tried switching channels, checking batteries, but nothing worked. "Probably just the terrain," Jake said, but he didn't sound convinced. Then we found the first strange thing, a small clearing we hadn't marked on any of our maps. In the center stood a crude arrangement of sticks, forming what looked like a miniature house or shrine. Around it, small stones had been arranged in a perfect circle. "What the hell is that?" Danny whispered. "Probably just some kids messing around," I said, not believing it myself. We were miles from anywhere, in dense wilderness. No kids would come this far to build stick figures. Jake knelt beside it, about to touch the structure, when Marcus grabbed his wrist. "Don't," he said firmly. "Let's keep moving." We continued on, but now the feeling of being watched had intensified. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following us. There was never anyone there, but the sensation remained. Around 5 p.m., Danny's GPS showed we were approaching the distress signal. The forest had opened slightly into a small meadow surrounded by towering pines, and there, sitting on a fallen log, was a woman. She jumped when she saw us, her eyes wide with fear. For a second, I thought she might run. "Ravencrest County Search and Rescue," I called out, keeping my voice calm. "Are you Valerie?" She nodded, her whole body trembling. She was in her mid-20s, dressed in proper hiking gear, but something was off. Her clothes were clean, no signs of having spent a night in the woods, no injuries I could see, just pure, naked fear on her face. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, approaching slowly with his medical kit. She shook her head. "We need to leave, now." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling beside her. "Did you get lost?" "Please," she whispered, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "We can't stay here. They'll come back when it gets dark." My blood ran cold. "Who will come back?" Before she could answer, there was a crashing sound from the trees to our left. We all spun around, and I instinctively reached for the bear spray on my belt. A man stumbled into the clearing. He was tall, gaunt, with a wild beard and clothes that hung in tatters. His eyes were what struck me most, wide, bloodshot, and filled with the same terror I'd seen in Valerie's. "You need to leave," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "All of you. They're coming back tonight. It's the solstice." Jake stepped forward. "Sir, calm down. We're search and rescue. We're here to help." "You can't help." The man cut him off. "No one can help now. They've been preparing for months. The ritual, the doorway." He was clearly disturbed, possibly dehydrated or suffering from exposure. Marcus slowly approached him with a water bottle. "Sir, please drink some water and sit down. We can get you both out of here safely." The man snatched the water bottle but backed away. "You don't understand. I've been watching them, hidden. They can't see me anymore, not after what I did." He took a long drink, water spilling down his beard. But they'll see you. They'll smell you. The outsiders. I glanced at Valerie, who was staring at the man with recognition. Do you know him? I whispered. She nodded slightly. That's Dr. Mercer. He was my professor. We came up here with a research group studying forest ecology. Her voice dropped even lower. 3 days ago, everyone else disappeared. He told me to run, to hide. I activated my beacon when I heard you coming. This wasn't making sense. A research group missing for 3 days? Why hadn't anyone reported it? Sir, Dr. Mercer, I said, trying to sound authoritative. We need to get both of you to safety. Whatever's happening here, we can sort it out once we're back in town. He laughed, a broken sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Safety? There is no safety anymore. Not since they opened it. Opened what? Marcus asked. Dr. Mercer just shook his head. You need to leave. Now. Before sunset. He looked up at the patches of sky visible through the canopy. You have maybe 2 hours. If you run, you might make it. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared back into the trees. Jake started after him, but I called him back. Let him go. Our priority is getting Valerie out safely. Danny checked her GPS again. If we head back now, we won't make it to the trailhead before dark. I looked at Valerie, who was shaking uncontrollably now. What exactly are you afraid of? What happened to your research group? She swallowed hard. We found something in a cave about a mile north of here. Ancient carvings. Dr. Mercer was excited, said they predated Native American settlements. Then people started acting strange, talking about voices in the forest. 3 nights ago, I woke up and everyone was gone except Dr. Mercer. He was different, scared, told me to run, to hide. I shared a look with my team. Something terrible had happened here, but our job was to get this woman to safety, not investigate. Okay, we're heading back now, I decided. Stay close together. We started back along the trail, moving as quickly as we could with Valerie in tow. She was physically fit, but kept glancing over her shoulder, which slowed our pace. About a mile from the meadow, we found another clearing, one we hadn't passed on our way in. And this one was much worse than the stick shrine. The ground had been cleared in a perfect circle about 30 feet across. The earth was carved with symbols I'd never seen before, spirals and angular lines that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Around the edge were small mounds that looked disturbingly like graves. What the fuck? Jake whispered. Valerie made a small, terrified sound. They were working on this. Every night, more symbols. They said it needed to be ready for the solstice. I suddenly realized what day it was, June 21st, the summer solstice. We need to keep moving, I said firmly. Danny, are we still on the right path? She checked her GPS, frowning. According to this, yes, but I don't remember this clearing. Maybe we got turned around, Marcus suggested. No, Danny insisted. We're on the exact same route we came in on. That's when I noticed something else. The shadows in the forest were wrong. The sun was starting to set, but the shadows weren't falling in the right direction. Some seemed to be stretching toward us rather than away. Let's go. Now. I grabbed Valerie's arm and started walking, not waiting for the others to follow. We pushed on faster, the fading light making the forest increasingly ominous. The silence had shifted too. Now there were occasional sounds that made no sense, like whispers just at the edge of hearing, or something heavy moving parallel to our path. Around mile 3, where we should have been getting close to more familiar territory, we hit another clearing we'd never seen before. This one had a cave entrance set into a small hillside. Valerie stopped dead in her tracks. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the cave." I checked my compass, then Danny's GPS. This can't be right. We're heading south, back toward the trailhead. "We must have gotten turned around," Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Danny insisted, showing me her GPS. "According to this, we're exactly where we should be. But this cave—" Marcus shone his flashlight toward the cave entrance. The beam seemed to dim as it approached the dark opening, like the darkness was swallowing the light. That's when we heard it, chanting. Low, rhythmic voices coming from inside the cave. Valerie started to back away. "It's them. They're starting." I should have turned around. I should have grabbed everyone and run in the opposite direction as fast as we could. But something compelled me forward. I needed to see what was happening. "Emily, don't," Marcus warned, but I was already approaching the cave entrance, my flashlight raised. The chanting grew louder as I neared the entrance. The air felt thick, charged with some kind of energy that made my skin prickle. I stopped at the mouth of the cave and shone my light inside. The beam illuminated a tunnel that descended sharply into the earth. The walls were covered with the same strange symbols we'd seen in the clearing, and the chanting was definitely coming from below. "We need to leave," Jake said, grabbing my shoulder. "Whatever's down there, it's not our problem. Our job is to get Valerie out safely." He was right. I knew he was right. But before I could respond, a scream echoed from the cave, human and terrified. "Someone's in trouble," I said, my rescue instincts kicking in. "Emily, no," Danny protested, but I was already stepping into the tunnel. "Stay with Valerie," I told them. "Marcus, with me. We'll just take a quick look. If anyone's in danger, we need to help them." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, no more. Jake and Danny stayed at the entrance with Valerie while Marcus and I descended into the cave. The tunnel was surprisingly smooth, almost like it had been polished. Our lights revealed more symbols carved into the walls, growing more complex as we went deeper. The chanting was clearer now. Words in a language I didn't recognize, spoken in unison by multiple voices. And there was something else mixing with it, whimpering, crying. About 50 feet in, the tunnel opened into a large chamber. I stopped at the edge, my flashlight revealing a scene that I still see when I close my eyes. About 20 people stood in a circle around a fire that burned with an unnatural bluish light. They wore dark robes decorated with the same symbols from the walls. In the center, next to the fire, was a stone altar, and on it, I'm not going to describe what I saw on that altar. I can't. All I'll say is that it wasn't an animal. The people in robes were so focused on their ritual that they hadn't noticed us yet. Among them, I recognized faces, the missing researchers from Valerie's group, their eyes vacant, movements mechanical. One figure stood apart from the others, taller, its face hidden in the shadows of its hood. It was speaking in that strange language, raising something above the altar. Marcus gripped my arm, his face pale in the dim light. "We need to leave, now." I nodded, but as we started to back away, my flashlight beam swept across the chamber, momentarily illuminating the tall figure's face. It wasn't human. I don't know what it was, but no human has eyes like that or skin that seems to shift and move like oil on water. And it saw us. The chanting stopped abruptly. Every head turned in our direction. And then the screaming started, not from the people in robes, but from something else, something unseen that made the very air vibrate with its fury. "Run!" Marcus shouted, pushing me back up the tunnel. We sprinted toward the entrance, the screaming and now pounding footsteps behind us. I could hear them coming, gaining on us, even though we were running as fast as we could in the confined space. We burst out of the cave to find Jake and Danny with their flashlights ready, faces tense. Go! I screamed, not stopping. They're coming! All 5 of us ran, crashing through the underbrush, not caring about the trail anymore, just trying to put distance between us and whatever was in that cave. The forest around us erupted with sound, not animals or birds, but whispers and wails that seemed to come from the trees themselves. The ground beneath our feet felt wrong, like it was shifting, trying to trip us. "Which way?" Jake shouted as we ran. Danny checked her GPS as we moved. "North, the road should be north." We changed direction, running blindly through the darkening forest. The sun had set completely now, and our flashlights created bobbing islands of light in the overwhelming darkness. Behind us, through the trees, I could see lights, not flashlights, but a sickly blue glow, the same color as the fire in the cave. They were spreading out, trying to flank us. "They're surrounding us," Valerie cried out. Marcus, who had been bringing up the rear, suddenly stopped and pulled his hunting knife from his belt. "Keep going. I'll hold them off." "No," I grabbed his arm. We stay together. A sound like nothing I've ever heard before tore through the forest. Part scream, part roar, wholly inhuman. It was close, too close, and then headlights cut through the trees ahead of us. "There!" Jake pointed. "The road!" We sprinted toward the lights, bursting through the tree line onto the gravel access road. A county sheriff's SUV was parked there, and beside it, 2 more SAR vehicles. Deputy Collins jumped out of his SUV, hand on his sidearm. "Blackwood, what the hell is going on? We've been trying to reach you for hours." "Start the engines," I shouted. "We need to leave now." To his credit, Collins didn't ask questions. He just reacted to the panic in my voice. Everyone piled into the vehicles as the noises from the forest grew louder, closer. As we pulled away, I looked back at the tree line. Figures stood at the edge of the forest, their robes fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel. And among them, towering above the rest, was the tall figure from the cave, its inhuman face now clearly visible in the taillight's glow. It raised a hand as we drove away, and I swear the trees themselves seemed to reach for our vehicles, branches stretching like arms trying to grab us. We made it back to town around midnight, reported everything to the sheriff's department and state police. They sent teams the next day, with federal agents joining them. They found nothing. No cave, no clearing with symbols, no evidence of any ritual or cult. According to their reports, they thoroughly searched the area where our GPS data showed we'd been. Valerie was questioned extensively, but with no evidence to support her story about the missing research team, they eventually labeled it a case of shared delusion brought on by environmental factors. The official report suggested that fungal spores or contaminated water might have caused hallucinations. Dr. Mercer was never found. My team knows what we saw. We don't talk about it much, but sometimes I'll catch Marcus staring into the distance, or notice how Jake refuses to take any calls for Whispering Pines area anymore. I still volunteer with SAR, but I've requested assignments away from that part of the forest. I tell myself it was just a group of crazy people performing some sick ritual, that the strange lights and sounds were tricks of the mind, stress responses to a traumatic situation. But then I remember those eyes, that face that wasn't a face, and the way the trees reached for us as we drove away. Sometimes at night, I wake up thinking I can hear whispering outside my window, a language I don't understand but somehow recognize from that cave. And on certain nights, when the moon is dark, I swear I can see blue lights moving in the forest beyond town. Whatever we interrupted that day, I don't think it ended when we escaped. I think it's still out there, waiting. And sometimes, I think it's getting closer. It was supposed to be our final hurrah before graduation. Me, Olivia, Ryan, Tessa, and Marcus had been friends since freshman year. We'd been through everything together. All-nighters, breakups, family drama, you name it. The four of us wanted one last adventure before we went our separate ways. So we planned this 3-day hiking trip in the Black Ridge Mountains. The morning started out perfectly. The weather was great, not too hot, just a light breeze. We were all in high spirits, joking around while loading up our packs. Ryan brought his fancy camera to capture some LinkedIn-worthy graduation photos, as he called them. Tessa packed enough trail mix to feed an army. Marcus had mapped out our entire route, marking the best spots to camp. I was in charge of the first aid kit and emergency supplies. There had been some tension between Ryan and Marcus lately over some stupid disagreement about a group project, but I figured a weekend away would help smooth things over. God, I was so wrong. The first few hours of the hike were amazing. The trail wound through these gorgeous pine forests with patches of wildflowers. We spotted a few deer in the distance and even caught sight of an eagle soaring overhead. Ryan kept stopping to take photos, which slowed us down, but no one minded. I remember noticing the first weird thing around midday. We took a break by this little stream to refill our water bottles. Marcus was showing us the map, pointing out how far we'd come, when Tessa suddenly got really quiet. When I asked her what was wrong, she just shook her head and said she felt like we were being watched. I laughed it off, telling her it was probably just a squirrel or something. But looking back, that was when things started to feel off. We continued our hike, aiming to reach the plateau Marcus had picked for our campsite before sunset. As we climbed higher, the forest changed. The trees became denser, taller, blocking out more of the sunlight. The cheerful conversations we'd been having gradually died down. Everyone seemed lost in their own thoughts. Ryan started complaining about the trail Marcus had chosen, saying it was too difficult and that we could have taken an easier route. Marcus snapped back, reminding Ryan that he was the one who wanted epic views for his photos. It was such a minor thing, but the way they were talking to each other felt weirdly intense. By the time we reached the plateau, the sun was already setting. It was a beautiful spot, with a clear view of the valley below and the surrounding peaks. Under normal circumstances, we would have been awestruck, but there was this underlying tension I couldn't explain. We set up camp efficiently. We'd done this enough times before. Tessa and I got the tent up while the guys gathered firewood. When Marcus came back with an armful of branches, Ryan made some snarky comment about how half of them were too damp to burn. Marcus just glared at him and dropped the wood by the fire pit. As darkness fell, we got the fire going and sat around it to have dinner. That's when I first noticed how oppressive the silence of the mountains felt. There were no cricket sounds, no rustling in the undergrowth, nothing. Just the crackling of our fire and our own voices, which seemed to get swallowed up by the vastness around us. We tried to keep things light, reminiscing about our college years, but every conversation somehow circled back to old grudges. Tessa brought up how Ryan had bailed on her birthday party last year because he got a better offer. Ryan reminded Marcus about the time he'd hit on Ryan's ex just weeks after they broke up. I found myself snapping at Tessa about some perceived slight from months ago that I'd completely forgotten about until that moment. It was like something was pulling these buried resentments out of us, magnifying them until they were all we could see. The weird thing was, I could feel myself getting angrier over these trivial things, but I couldn't stop it. It was like watching myself from the outside, wondering why I was being such a jerk to people I cared about. The temperature dropped sharply once night fully set in. We huddled closer to the fire, which cast these eerie, dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. The flames seemed to flare unnaturally high at times, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness above us. Ryan started in on Marcus again about the trail choice, but this time he went further, bringing up how Marcus always had to be in control, how he manipulated people. Marcus shot back, accusing Ryan of being jealous of his academic success, of being fake. Their voices got louder, more aggressive. Tessa tried to intervene, telling them to calm down, but Ryan turned on her next, bringing up some gossip she'd allegedly spread about him freshman year. I remember feeling frozen in place, watching my friends tear into each other with a viciousness I'd never seen before. Then Ryan said something about Marcus's family. I don't even remember what exactly, just that it hit a nerve, and Marcus lunged across the fire at him. They crashed to the ground, sending up a cloud of dirt and pine needles. This wasn't playful wrestling or a minor scuffle. Marcus had his hands around Ryan's throat. Ryan was punching Marcus in the ribs, trying to get him off. Tessa and I jumped up, trying to pull them apart. I grabbed Marcus's arm, trying to break his grip, while Tessa yanked on Ryan's jacket. But they were like animals, snarling and thrashing. Ryan's elbow caught me in the chest, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled backward, watching in horror as my best friends tried to seriously hurt each other. What terrified me most was their eyes. In the firelight, they looked wrong, like there was something else looking out from behind them, something that wasn't Ryan or Marcus. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just knew I had to get away from there, so I ran. I bolted into the forest without any clear direction, just away from the violence. I had my phone in my pocket and thankfully remembered to grab my flashlight from beside my backpack. The beam bounced wildly as I ran, catching glimpses of trees and rocks and the uneven ground ahead of me. The forest was impossibly dark. My flashlight barely seemed to penetrate more than a few feet in front of me. The trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching down like gnarled fingers. Several times I nearly tripped over exposed roots or rocks, barely catching myself. After running for what felt like forever, I stopped, bending over with my hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. That's when I realized I had no idea where I was. The campsite could have been in any direction. I couldn't see any glow from the fire, couldn't hear any sounds of the fight, just my own ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. I tried to calm down, to think rationally. I had my phone, but of course there was no signal up here. The flashlight app would drain my battery fast, so I switched back to my actual flashlight. I tried to remember the basic wilderness survival training we'd gone through. Stay put if you're lost, conserve energy, wait for rescue. But something told me I couldn't stay still. I felt hunted. I swept my flashlight in a slow circle around me, trying to get my bearings. The trees all looked the same, tall pines with thick trunks and branches that started high up. The ground was covered in a carpet of needles and the occasional rock or fallen branch. That's when I saw it. Between two distant trees, something reflected my flashlight beam. Two glowing points, like embers in a dying fire. Too high off the ground to be an animal, too still. I froze, my flashlight fixed on those points of light. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back at me from the darkness. Then my flashlight flickered, just for a second. When the beam stabilized, the eyes were closer, much closer. I still couldn't make out a clear shape around them, just a tall, darker shadow against the night. I didn't think. I ran again, in the opposite direction. crashing through the undergrowth, branches whipping at my face and arms. I didn't dare look back, terrified of what I might see gaining on me. My foot caught on something, a root or rock, and I went down hard, my flashlight flying from my hand. It landed several feet away, still on, the beam pointing uselessly into the trees. I scrambled toward it on my hands and knees, grabbed it, and swung it behind me. There was nothing there, just trees and shadows. I got to my feet, wincing at the pain in my ankle. Not broken, but definitely twisted. I limped forward, determined to put as much distance as possible between me and whatever I'd seen. Time lost all meaning as I pushed through the forest. My ankle throbbed with each step. The cold night air burned my lungs. I kept the flashlight moving, checking all around me, jumping at every sound. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves in the light breeze. Sometimes I thought I caught glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, or heard footsteps that weren't my own. Whenever I swung my flashlight toward these disturbances, there was nothing there. But the feeling of being followed, of being watched, never went away. After what must have been hours of this terrified wandering, I spotted something ahead that made my heart leap. The orange glow of a fire. Relief flooded through me. Maybe it was our campsite. Maybe Ryan and Marcus had calmed down. Or maybe it was other hikers who could help me. I moved toward the light as quickly as my injured ankle would allow, pushing through a final stand of trees to reach the edge of a small clearing. There was indeed a campfire there, burning steadily in a ring of stones. But as my eyes adjusted to the brightness, I realized with growing horror that the figures sitting around that fire weren't my friends. They weren't even human. I can't adequately describe what I saw. My mind doesn't want to form the words, doesn't want to remember the details. They were vaguely humanoid in shape, but wrong in every dimension. Their limbs were too long, too thin, bent at impossible angles. Their heads were misshapen, with features that seemed to shift and flow like wax under heat. And their faces, God, their faces, stretched and twisted, with two wide mouths filled with needle-like teeth. Their eyes reflected the firelight like an animal's, but with an intelligence that was unmistakably predatory, aware, hungry. They were passing something between them, something that dripped dark liquid onto the ground. I didn't want to know what it was. One of them stopped suddenly, its head swiveling toward me with a jerky, unnatural motion. It made a sound, not a growl or a hiss, but something between a clicking and a high-pitched whine that set my teeth on edge. The others turned then too, all those reflective eyes fixing on me. One of them stood, unfolding to a height that had to be 7 or 8 feet, its limbs crackling like dry branches. I backed away slowly, then turned and ran, ignoring the screaming pain in my ankle. Behind me, I heard movement, those same clicking sounds growing louder, more excited. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before, running blindly through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. I lost track of where I was going, consumed only by the need to get away. My flashlight beam bounced wildly, barely helping me avoid obstacles. Several times I nearly fell again, but somehow kept my footing. The sounds of pursuit never faded. Sometimes they seemed to come from right behind me, sometimes from the sides, as if they were herding me, toying with me. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, when my legs were about to give out entirely, I crashed into something solid that knocked me backward onto the ground. I raised my flashlight, ready to see one of those twisted figures looming over me. Instead, the beam illuminated a startled human face, a man in a heavy jacket with a park ranger patch. His own flashlight pointed at me. "Whoa, easy there," he said, reaching down to help me up. "Are you Olivia Chen?" I could only nod, too out of breath and shocked to speak. "Your friends reported you missing when you didn't come back to camp," he explained. "We've had search teams out looking for you for hours." I turned to look behind me, sweeping my flashlight across the trees. There was nothing there. No twisted figures, no glowing eyes, just the dark forest. "They're out there," I managed to gasp. "Something's out there, following me." The ranger looked concerned, scanning the trees with his much more powerful flashlight. "I don't see anything. What did you see exactly?" I opened my mouth to explain, but found I couldn't put it into words. How could I describe those creatures, the malevolence I felt emanating from them? He'd think I was crazy. "Let's get you back to your friends," he said when I didn't answer. "They're worried sick." He radioed in that he'd found me, then helped me limp through the forest. According to him, I'd somehow circled back toward our original campsite and was less than half a mile away. The whole time we walked, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see those ember eyes watching from between the trees. When we reached the campsite, Ryan, Marcus, and Tessa rushed toward me, pulling me into a group hug that nearly knocked me over. They all looked terrible, disheveled, with dark circles under their eyes, scratches on their faces and arms. The ranger gave us a stern lecture about wilderness safety and the dangers of wandering off alone at night. He seemed satisfied that I was just spooked and exhausted rather than seriously injured, and after making sure we had enough supplies, he headed back to join the other searchers. Once he was gone, we all just stared at each other in silence. Ryan had a darkening bruise on his jaw. Marcus's knuckles were scraped raw. Tessa's eyes were red from crying. "What happened last night?" I finally asked. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We don't know," Tessa said quietly. "We were arguing, and then it's all blurry, like something took over." "I remember being so angry," Ryan added, looking ashamed. "Angrier than I've ever been, but I can't remember why." Marcus nodded slowly. "It was like something was feeding on it, making it worse. And then you were gone, and we couldn't find you, and suddenly we were all clear-headed again, terrified about what had happened to you." I told them about running through the forest, about the eyes I'd seen, about the things around the campfire. As I spoke, I could see recognition dawning in their expressions. "I kept seeing things from the corner of my eye," Tessa whispered, "while we were searching for you, like shadows moving on their own." We packed up camp in record time, abandoning our plans for the full weekend trip. No one wanted to spend another night on that mountain. The hike back down was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, jumping at every sound from the forest around us. I've spent months trying to rationalize what happened. Maybe we were all suffering from some kind of group hallucination caused by altitude sickness or carbon monoxide from the fire. Maybe there was something in the water. Maybe it was just the stress of impending graduation, making us all temporarily lose it. But deep down, I know better. Something was in those mountains with us. Something that fed on our negative emotions, amplified them, turned us against each other. Something that chased me through the darkness for its own amusement. We graduated a month later and went our separate ways. We still text occasionally, but we never talk about what happened in the Black Ridge Mountains. I think we're all afraid that acknowledging it might somehow bring it back, or worse, confirm that it was real. All I know is I'll never go hiking in those mountains again. And sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I still see those glowing ember eyes watching me from the darkness beyond my bedroom window. I've debated for months whether to share this. Even typing it out makes my hands shake, but maybe putting it into words will help me process what happened to my family at Oakwood Forest last spring. My husband Michael and I had been noticing how our kids, Emma, 12, and Tyler, 9, were always glued to their devices. We barely had family conversations anymore, so we planned this camping trip as a way to reconnect. No phones, no distractions, just us experiencing nature together. God, I wish we'd just gone to a theme park instead. We'd been to Oakwood Forest once before, years ago when the kids were tiny, and remembered it being beautiful. The ranger station was closed when we arrived Friday afternoon, but we had our permit printed out and knew our assigned site was about 2 miles down the main trail. Michael was excited about how remote it was. Proper camping, he called it. The first warning sign came about halfway to our campsite. Tyler stopped suddenly on the trail and looked around with this confused expression. "What's wrong, buddy?" Michael asked. "It's super quiet," Tyler said. "Where are all the birds?" I hadn't noticed until he mentioned it, but he was right. The forest was completely silent. No bird song, no squirrels rustling in the underbrush, nothing. I told myself it was just the time of day or maybe the weather, but something about that silence felt heavy, unnatural. We reached our campsite around 4 p.m. and got busy setting up the tent and organizing our gear. The site was in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines and oaks. Beautiful spot, but that silence continued to bother me. Every time I looked up from what I was doing, I found myself scanning the tree line. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Michael got a fire going as the sun started to set, and we roasted hot dogs for dinner. The kids seemed to be enjoying themselves, especially when we broke out the marshmallows for s'mores. But I noticed Emma kept looking over her shoulder into the darkening woods. "You okay, Em?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, but her voice was tight. "Just thought I heard something." After we cleaned up from dinner, Michael tried to lighten the mood by telling scary stories. But they hit differently when you're actually sitting in the middle of a silent forest with darkness pressing in from all sides. We called it an early night around 9:30. The 4 of us squeezed into our family tent, Michael and I on the outside edges, kids between us. I drifted off to sleep listening to Tyler's soft breathing, trying to ignore how the normal nighttime forest sounds, crickets, frogs, owls, were still completely absent. I woke up a few hours later, needing to use the bathroom. My phone said it was 2:17 a.m. I slipped out of my sleeping bag, being careful not to wake anyone, and grabbed the flashlight. As I turned to leave the tent, I automatically did a quick head count. Michael was snoring softly. Tyler was curled up in his Spider-Man sleeping bag, and Emma wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe she'd had the same idea and was already outside using the bathroom. I unzipped the tent and whispered her name. Nothing. The campsite was empty, the fire reduced to glowing embers that cast barely any light. "Emma," I called a little louder, sweeping the flashlight across the campsite. My heart started beating faster when there was no response. I rushed back into the tent and shook Michael awake. "Emma's gone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady to avoid scaring Tyler. Michael bolted upright. "What do you mean, gone?" "She's not in the tent, and she's not answering when I call." Michael scrambled out of his sleeping bag and grabbed his own flashlight. "Stay here with Tyler," he said, already moving toward the tent entrance. "I'll find her." "Michael, wait," I said, grabbing his arm. "We should call for help." But even as I said it, I remembered we had no cell service out here. We were completely on our own. "She can't have gone far," Michael insisted. "Maybe she sleepwalked or something. I'll find her and bring her back." Before I could argue further, he was gone, the beam of his flashlight disappearing into the trees. I sat at the tent entrance, keeping one eye on Tyler, who was still sound asleep, and the other on the dark forest, straining to hear anything over the sound of my own pounding heart. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I kept checking my phone, 2:31, 2:47, 3:04. The longer they were gone, the more scenarios played through my mind, each worse than the last. Had Emma wandered off and gotten lost? Had she fallen and hurt herself? Or was it something worse? Around 3:15, Tyler stirred and asked where everyone was. I tried to sound calm as I explained that Emma had gone for a walk and Dad went to find her. He wanted to help search, but I convinced him to stay in the tent with me. I couldn't handle the thought of losing both my children in these woods. Finally, at 3:42, I heard rustling in the underbrush. I grabbed the heavy camping flashlight, the only weapon we had, and positioned myself in front of the tent, ready to protect Tyler from whatever was coming. The beam of Michael's flashlight broke through the tree line, and I nearly collapsed with relief when I saw Emma in his arms. He was carrying her, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder. I rushed forward to meet them. "Oh, thank God, what happened? Is she hurt?" Michael's face was pale, his eyes wide with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something I didn't want to name. "She's not injured," he said, his voice tight. "But something's wrong. She's not making sense." He carried Emma into the tent and laid her gently on her sleeping bag. She was shivering despite the mild spring night, her teeth chattering. When I touched her cheek, her skin was ice cold. "Emma, honey, what happened?" I asked, pulling her sleeping bag around her shoulders. She looked at me with unfocused eyes. "The dark thing," she whispered. "It was talking to me." "What dark thing, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while exchanging alarmed looks with Michael. "In the trees. It knew my name." Her voice was flat, distant. "It said it's been waiting for someone like me." Michael pulled me aside while Tyler tried to comfort his sister. "I found her in a clearing about half a mile northeast of here," he whispered. "She was just sitting there on the ground, rocking back and forth. When I called her name, she didn't even recognize me at first." "Could she have been sleepwalking?" I asked desperately. "I don't think so," Michael said. "Rebecca, something happened to her out there. And—" He hesitated, looking back at Emma. "And what?" I demanded. "I don't think we were alone out there," he said quietly. "When I was carrying her back, I kept hearing footsteps behind us. And once, I think I heard someone laugh. A cold feeling spread through my chest. We need to get out of here, now." Michael nodded. "Pack only what we need. Leave the rest." We moved quickly, throwing essential items into our backpacks while Emma sat wrapped in her sleeping bag, staring blankly ahead. Tyler asked questions we couldn't answer, his young face pinched with worry. We were just about ready to leave when Emma suddenly stiffened. "It's coming," she whispered. At that moment, a voice called from the darkness beyond our campsite. "Hello? Anybody there?" The voice sounded normal enough, a man's voice, casual, friendly even. But something about it made my skin crawl. Michael gestured for us to be silent and stay low in the tent. "Just another camper," he whispered. But I could tell he didn't believe it. There were no other campsites nearby. "I saw your light," the voice called again, closer now. "I think I'm a bit turned around. Could use some help." Emma began to tremble violently. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the voice from the clearing." Michael unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. His sharp intake of breath told me whatever he saw wasn't good. "There's a man standing at the edge of our campsite," he whispered. "He's just—" standing there in the dark. "Hello in the tent," the voice called, a new edge to it now. "I know you're in there. Why don't you come out? The little girl and I were having such a nice chat earlier." My blood turned to ice. I pulled both children close to me, trying to shield them with my body. Michael reached for the camping flashlight, the heavy metal one that could double as a weapon. "When I say go," he whispered, "we run for the trail. The car is only 2 miles away." "What if he follows us?" I asked. "He won't catch all of us," Michael said grimly. The tent zipper slowly began to open from the outside. "Go," Michael shouted, bursting through the tent flap and shining the flashlight directly into the face of the man outside. For a split second, I saw him, average height, wearing dark clothes, with a face that looked oddly wrong. Not deformed, just wrong somehow, like it wasn't quite human. Then we were running, Michael in the lead with Emma's hand in his, me bringing up the rear with Tyler. Behind us, the man let out a sound that started as a laugh and morphed into something else, something that didn't sound human at all. Heavy footsteps crashed through the underbrush after us. We ran blindly, the beams of our flashlights bouncing wildly across the trail. Tyler stumbled and I yanked him back to his feet without breaking stride. Emma was openly sobbing now, but kept running. Behind us, the footsteps and that terrible laughter continued. "He's getting closer," I gasped. Michael suddenly veered off the main trail onto a smaller path. "Shortcut to the parking area," he panted. "Remember from the map?" I didn't remember any shortcut, but I followed blindly, trusting him. The path narrowed until we were running single file, branches whipping at our faces. The footsteps behind us seemed to falter, then resume, more distant now. After what felt like miles, but was probably only a few hundred yards, the path opened onto the gravel parking area where our SUV waited. Michael fumbled with the keys while I pushed the kids into the back seat, not even bothering with seat belts. As soon as we were all in, he peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying behind us. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of a dark figure emerging from the tree line, standing perfectly still, watching us go. We drove straight to the nearest police station, about 40 minutes away in the small town of Riverdale. The officers took our report seriously, especially after seeing Emma's condition. She was still disoriented, struggling to answer basic questions. They dispatched rangers to check out our campsite and search the area. The hospital kept Emma overnight for observation. The doctors said she was suffering from severe hypothermia and shock, despite the mild weather. They couldn't explain why her body temperature had dropped so drastically. The rangers found our campsite exactly as we'd left it, tent still standing, supplies scattered around. But they found no evidence of anyone else having been there. No footprints except our own, no signs of a struggle in the clearing where Michael found Emma. They suggested she might have wandered off and gotten confused in the dark, maybe fallen into a creek and gotten wet, explaining the hypothermia. But that doesn't explain the voice we all heard, the footsteps chasing us, the figure I saw in the parking lot. Emma recovered physically after a few days, but she's not the same. She has nightmares almost every night. She refuses to talk about what happened in those woods, what the dark thing said to her. The therapist says it might be a coping mechanism, that her mind is protecting her from trauma. We moved away from that area about a month after it happened. Couldn't stand being so close to those woods anymore. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear that awful laugh outside our window. Michael installed a security system within days of moving into the new house. I've searched online for similar experiences in Oakwood Forest. There's not much. A few vague stories about hikers feeling watched. One account from the 1970s about a family that went missing. They were found safe a week later, claiming they got lost, but apparently the children were deeply traumatized. The worst part is not knowing. Not knowing what happened to Emma in those woods. Not knowing who or what was out there with us that night. Not knowing if it's still out there, waiting for another family to make the mistake we did. All I know is that I'll never set foot in another forest again. And sometimes, when I look at Emma when she doesn't know I'm watching, I see her staring out the window with a strange expression on her face, like she's listening for something only she can hear. I never thought I'd be typing this out. It's been 3 weeks, and my leg is still in a cast, but that's not what keeps me up at night. There are moments when I close my eyes and I'm right back there, feeling the sun burning through my clothes, my throat so dry it hurt to swallow, and that terrible feeling of being completely helpless. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, and I still can't believe we made it out. Melissa and I had been dating for about 1.5 years. Things were getting serious, but we'd hit a rough patch lately. Both stressed with work, not communicating well, you know how it goes. We decided a weekend away would help us reconnect. Just us, the stars, and nature. No distractions, no phones, no work emails. Sandstone Desert National Park seemed perfect. Beautiful hiking trails, those incredible rock formations, and the clearest night skies you could imagine. We arrived Friday morning, super excited. The weather forecast was ideal, warm days, cool nights. We checked in at the visitor center, filled our water bottles, and grabbed a map. The ranger at the desk gave us the usual spiel about staying hydrated and sticking to marked trails. I remember laughing when he said, "The desert doesn't forgive mistakes." Funny how that doesn't seem like a joke anymore. We chose a moderate 6-mile trail that looped through some incredible scenery. The plan was to hike to our designated camping spot, set up before sunset, then enjoy a nice dinner under the stars. Melissa had packed her fancy camera to capture the sunset against the red rocks. I had a small bottle of wine hidden in my pack, a little surprise for her. The first few hours were perfect. The trail wound through these massive red rock formations, each one more impressive than the last. Melissa kept stopping to take photos, and I didn't mind one bit. We held hands, talked about everything and nothing, just enjoying being together without the usual distractions. We reached our campsite around 3 p.m. It was in this small clearing surrounded by rocks that created a natural windbreak. We could see for miles across the desert from there. I remember thinking how isolated we were. Not another soul in sight, just vast stretches of red rocks and scrubby vegetation all the way to the horizon. It felt incredible to be so removed from everything. We set up our tent, arranged our little campsite, and decided to explore the area a bit before sunset. There was a small unmarked path that led up to a higher viewpoint about 1/2 mile from our camp. The ranger hadn't mentioned it, but it looked well trodden enough to be safe. That's when everything went to hell. We were about 200 yards up this path. I was leading the way, pointing out a hawk circling overhead. I turned around to make sure Melissa could see it, walking backward for just a few steps. That's all it took. My heel caught on something, a rock buried in the sand that I never saw. 1 second I was standing, the next I was falling, tumbling down a small incline. The pain was immediate and blinding. I felt something in my leg snap. It wasn't just a crack. It was a wet, tearing sensation that made me instantly nauseous. I screamed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I screamed like a child. It hurt more than anything I'd ever felt. Melissa ran to me, her face white with panic. I was clutching my leg, unable to speak beyond gasping, "My leg, my leg." She tried to help me up, but the second I put any weight on it, the pain made my vision go dark around the edges. "Jack, stop. Don't move," she said, easing me back down. Her hands were shaking as she gently rolled up my pant leg. Even I could tell it was bad. My lower leg was already swelling, turning an ugly purple color, and there was this weird angle to it that made my stomach turn. We both knew instantly this wasn't a sprain. This was serious. Melissa pulled out her phone. No signal, not even one bar. We'd known service would be spotty, but somehow in that moment, seeing those empty bars felt like a death sentence. She tried walking around, holding the phone up, but nothing. "It's okay," I tried to say, even as sweat beaded on my forehead from the pain. "Let's just think this through." We had to assess our situation. We were at least 3 miles from the main trail. From there, it was another 2 miles to the parking lot. No one knew exactly where we were. We had water and food for the weekend, but our resources were limited. And I couldn't walk, not even a step. Melissa dug through our first aid kit, which suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. Some bandages, pain relievers, antiseptic wipes. Nothing that could help with what was clearly a broken leg. She gave me some ibuprofen, which was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water gun. We discussed our options, trying to stay calm. 1. Melissa could go for help, leaving me behind, but that would mean at least 5 to 6 hours before anyone could reach me. 2. We could try to make it back together, with me leaning on her, but the terrain was rough, and I couldn't put any weight on my leg. 3. We could stay put and hope someone passed by. None seemed good. The temperature was already in the high 80s and climbing. By midday, it would be well over 100 degrees. We had water, but not enough if we got stranded for multiple days. "I'll go," Melissa finally said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "I'll run the whole way if I have to." I hated the idea of her leaving, but it made the most sense. She packed a small bag with water and her phone. We agreed she'd mark her path with bright strips of fabric torn from a bandana so she could find her way back if needed. Just as she was about to leave, we heard something, footsteps on the trail. At first I thought I was hallucinating from the pain, but Melissa heard it too. She jumped up, calling out, "Hello! We need help! Hello!" A man appeared around the bend, tall, lean, wearing hiking gear and a wide-brimmed hat. He was by himself, carrying a serious-looking backpack with all sorts of gear attached to it. "Everything okay?" he called out before spotting me on the ground. His expression changed immediately. "Oh, shit." He introduced himself as Carter, as he quickly made his way over to us. He knelt beside me, his movements efficient and practiced. "I'm a wilderness guide," he explained, examining my leg without touching it. "This looks like a fracture, possibly tibial. How's the pain on a scale of 1 to 10? 11, I managed through gritted teeth. Carter pulled a satellite phone from his pack, and I could have cried with relief. But after several attempts to connect, he shook his head. "Something's interfering with the signal here. We're in a dead zone." He checked his GPS device. "The nearest ranger station is about 4 miles that way," he pointed. "I think our best bet is to get you there." Carter fashioned a makeshift splint using hiking poles and strips of cloth from a spare shirt in his pack. Even with his gentle movements, the process was excruciating. Melissa held my hand so tight her knuckles went white. I focused on her face, trying to block out the pain. Once my leg was immobilized, Carter and Melissa positioned themselves on either side of me. On the count of 3, they lifted me to a standing position. The world spun, and I thought I might pass out, or throw up, maybe both. Easy does it, Carter said. We'll go slowly, just focus on each step. And so began the most agonizing journey of my life. Every movement sent shockwaves of pain through my leg. We'd move a few yards, then I'd have to stop, gasping for breath. Melissa kept encouraging me, her voice steady even though I could see the fear in her eyes. The desert sun was merciless. Within an hour, we were all drenched in sweat. My mouth felt like it was full of sand. We rationed our water, but I was losing fluids faster than I could replace them. The pain meds had barely touched the edges of my agony. We'd covered maybe half a mile in that hour. At this rate, it would take us all day to reach help, if I could make it at all. The reality of our situation was sinking in. I was slowing them down. What if I couldn't make it? What if I passed out? Would they have to leave me? My thoughts were getting foggy, which I knew wasn't a good sign. The combination of pain, heat, and dehydration was taking its toll. I stumbled more frequently, leaning heavier on my supports. After another half hour of tortuous progress, my body simply gave out. My legs buckled, and I collapsed to the ground, dragging Melissa and Carter down with me. I couldn't get up again. I physically couldn't do it. I can't, I gasped. I'm sorry. I can't go any further. Melissa knelt beside me, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She was trying so hard to be strong, but I could see she was terrified. Carter checked my pulse, his expression grim. His heart rate's too fast, and he's showing signs of shock, he told Melissa quietly, as if I couldn't hear. We need to get him out of this heat. Carter quickly created a makeshift shelter using his emergency blanket to provide some shade. Melissa pressed a water bottle to my lips, forcing me to drink even though I felt too nauseous to swallow. New plan, Carter said, unfolding his map. I'm going to run ahead to get help. Melissa will stay with you. I can move faster alone. I watched as he marked our position on Melissa's map, gave her his spare emergency blanket, and divided the remaining water. He promised to return with help as quickly as possible. As Carter disappeared down the trail, a terrible quiet settled over us. Melissa sat beside me, applying wet bandanas to my forehead. The pain in my leg had settled into a constant throbbing agony that made it hard to think. The temperature kept climbing. We were down to our last liter of water. Talk to me, Jack, Melissa said whenever my eyes started to close. Stay with me. I tried to keep talking, but it was getting harder to form coherent thoughts. I remember mumbling apologies for ruining our trip, for putting her in danger. She kept squeezing my hand, telling me everything would be okay, but her voice sounded farther and farther away. I don't know how much time passed. The sun moved across the sky, shadows shifting around us. The heat was like a physical weight pressing down. My mouth was so dry my tongue felt swollen. Melissa kept checking her phone, but there was still no signal. I started to drift in and out of consciousness. In my more lucid moments, I could see the fear etched on Melissa's face as she tried to keep me awake, keep me talking. But the darkness at the edges of my vision kept growing, pulling me under. In what I now realize was probably delirium, I began to hear a distant rumbling sound. I thought I was imagining it, a hallucination brought on by pain and dehydration. But Melissa heard it too. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, as if afraid to hope. The sound grew louder. An engine. Melissa jumped to her feet, grabbing one of our brightly colored shirts. She ran a short distance away, waving the shirt wildly above her head, screaming for help. I managed to lift my head enough to see a cloud of dust in the distance, and then, emerging from the haze like some kind of desert mirage, a white park ranger truck bouncing over the uneven terrain. It pulled up near us, and a woman in a ranger uniform jumped out. "I'm Diana," she said, kneeling beside me immediately. "Another hiker found Carter. He told us where to find you." She checked my vitals, her movements quick and sure. "Let's get you out of here." Diana and Melissa helped me into the truck. The movement was agony, but the air conditioning inside felt like heaven. Diana hooked me up to a portable oxygen tank and started an IV in my arm. "You're dehydrated and in shock," she explained. "This will help until we get you to medical facilities." As the truck bounced back toward civilization, I kept drifting in and out of awareness. I remember fragments: Diana on her radio calling for medical evacuation, Melissa holding my hand, the landscape blurring outside the windows. When we finally reached the ranger station, there was an ambulance waiting. The paramedics transferred me quickly, asking questions I could barely focus enough to answer. Melissa climbed in beside me, still refusing to let go of my hand. The hospital confirmed what we already knew. My tibia and fibula were both broken, requiring surgery to place pins and a metal plate. I was severely dehydrated and suffering from heat exhaustion, borderline heat stroke. If help had arrived even an hour later, the doctor said, things could have been much worse. It's been 3 weeks now. The physical injuries are healing, but something else has stayed with me. A visceral understanding of how quickly things can go wrong, how thin the line is between a perfect day and a fight for survival. I still wake up sometimes feeling the desert heat pressing down on me, my throat parched, that terrible helplessness washing over me. Melissa and I are closer than ever now. Nothing puts your relationship in perspective quite like facing a life or death situation together. Carter visited us in the hospital. Turns out he ran 5 miles in punishing heat to find help. Diana stopped by too, bringing us a safety whistle and emergency beacon for next time. I laughed and told her there wouldn't be a next time. But deep down, I know we were lucky, so damn lucky. If Carter hadn't come along when he did, if that other hiker hadn't found him, if Diana hadn't been able to reach us so quickly. I can't stop thinking about all the ways it could have gone differently. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes. The ranger at the visitor center wasn't joking, and now I understand exactly what he meant. I've been debating whether to share this for weeks now. It's been almost a month since my camping trip to Pine Haven, and I still wake up in cold sweats, thinking I hear those footsteps again. I need to get this off my chest, even if no one believes me. I've been an avid hiker and camper since I was a kid. My dad taught me everything about surviving in the wilderness, how to build fires, identify edible plants, navigate without a compass, the works. I've done solo trips for years, even in pretty remote places, but nothing like what happened at Pine Haven. I had taken a week off work, desperately needing to disconnect. No cell service, no emails, no people, just me and the forest. I'd heard about Pine Haven from a buddy who works for the forestry department, said it was pristine, untouched, and virtually unknown to the average hiker. Perfect. It took me almost 4 hours of driving, plus another 3 hours hiking off trail with my GPS to find the clearing he'd marked for me. It was everything he promised, a beautiful open space surrounded by towering pines, a small stream about 50 yards away, and absolutely no sign of human presence. I remember feeling this wave of relief as I dropped my pack. Finally, real solitude. But that feeling didn't last long. I got to work setting up camp, and about halfway through pitching my tent, I got this weird sensation at the back of my neck. You know that feeling when someone's staring at you? Like that, but stronger. I turned around expecting to see a deer or maybe a fox, but there was nothing there, just the dense wall of trees surrounding the clearing. I shrugged it off. When you're alone in the wilderness, your brain plays tricks on you. It's just heightened awareness, I told myself. But I couldn't shake it completely. The feeling lingered while I finished setting up camp, gathered firewood, and filtered water from the stream. By late afternoon, I had a decent fire going and was heating up some dehydrated chili. The sun was starting to set, filtering through the trees in these long golden rays. It should have been peaceful, but that prickling sensation kept crawling up my spine. I found myself constantly scanning the tree line, looking for something. As darkness fell, the forest changed. Anyone who's camped knows this. The daytime forest and the nighttime forest might as well be different planets. But this was different. The normal nighttime sounds, crickets, the occasional owl, rustling of nocturnal animals, they were there, but they seemed off somehow, like they were being interrupted or disturbed. I tried to focus on my dinner and the warmth of the fire, but I couldn't relax. Every few minutes I'd whip my head around, convinced I'd seen movement from the corner of my eye. But each time, there was nothing there. Around 9 p.m. I decided to turn in. Maybe sleep would reset whatever weird anxiety I was feeling. I banked the fire carefully, hung my food bag from a branch about 100 feet from camp, bare precautions, and crawled into my tent with my flashlight and a book. I must have read the same paragraph 20 times without comprehending a word. The feeling of being watched had intensified, and now every sound outside made me freeze. A branch snapping, leaves rustling when there was no wind. What freaked me out most was the pattern. These sounds were circling my clearing, moving in a deliberate way that random wildlife doesn't. At some point I turned off my flashlight to save the batteries. Big mistake. In the darkness, my hearing became hypersensitive, and that's when I first heard them. Footsteps. Not the scurrying of small animals or the heavy movement of a deer. These were deliberate, methodical, human-like, but somehow wrong. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Pause. They were coming closer to my tent from the eastern edge of the clearing. I held my breath, my heart hammering so loud I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. My hand found my hunting knife under my pillow, though I'm not sure what good I thought it would do. The footsteps stopped about 20 feet from my tent. Then, after what felt like an eternity, they began again. But now they were circling, slowly working their way around my tent in a clockwise motion, never rushing, never hesitating. Just that same steady, deliberate pace. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. I was paralyzed. Every instinct screamed to run, but where? I was miles from the nearest trail, in pitch darkness, with something circling me. Running seemed like the worst possible option. The footsteps completed a full circle around my tent, then stopped directly in front of the entrance. I could see the shadow of something against the thin fabric of my tent. The moonlight was bright enough that I should have been able to make out a silhouette, but what I saw made no sense. It wasn't shaped right. Too tall, too thin in some places, too bulky in others. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My hand gripped the knife so hard my knuckles must have been white. For what felt like hours, that shadow remained motionless outside my tent. No sound except for a strange, soft scraping, like branches being dragged across the ground, but rhythmic, almost like breathing. I must have passed out from exhaustion and terror at some point, because the next thing I remember is jolting awake to the first rays of sunlight. My body was drenched in sweat, muscles aching from being tensed all night. For a few blissful seconds, I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then I saw the tracks. not normal human footprints, not animal tracks either. The ground around my tent had these bizarre indentations, like someone had jabbed the earth with irregular-shaped sticks, creating a perfect circle around my tent. And directly in front of the entrance, where I'd seen that shadow standing, the ground was disturbed in a way I can't properly describe, like something heavy had been dragging itself back and forth. I packed up faster than I ever have in my life. Didn't even bother with breakfast or properly securing everything in my pack. Just threw it all together and started moving. The whole time, that feeling of being watched never left. The hike out was a blur of paranoia. Every sound made me jump. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced something was following me. A few times, I'd catch glimpses of movement between the trees, always just at the edge of my peripheral vision. When I'd turn to look directly, there would be nothing there. But I know I saw something moving. About halfway back to the trailhead, I heard the footsteps again. This time behind me, matching my pace, but staying just far enough back that I couldn't see what was making them. I broke into a run, scrambling down the trail with my heavy pack bouncing painfully against my back. I don't remember much of the drive home. I know I was going way too fast on those forest roads, constantly checking my rear-view mirror. The rational part of my brain kept trying to come up with explanations. Maybe it was a bear, maybe some local was messing with me. Maybe I was just sleep-deprived and imagining things. But I know what I experienced, and I know it wasn't normal. The worst part came after I got home. I thought I'd feel safe once I was back in my apartment, surrounded by the comforting sounds of civilization. But that night, as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard it again. That same deliberate footstep pattern outside my bedroom window. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. I've moved my bed away from the window. I've installed security cameras. I've even had friends stay over. The footsteps don't come when other people are here, but the moment I'm alone again, especially at night, they return. Always circling, always stopping right where they can watch me. I haven't gone back to Pine Haven. I haven't gone camping since. My gear sits untouched in my closet. But sometimes, when I open that closet door, I catch a whiff of something that doesn't belong in my apartment. Pine needles, damp earth, and something else. Something musty and wrong. Whatever was watching me in that forest followed me home. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me. All I know is that it's patient, and it's still out there, just beyond where I can see it, waiting for something. I'm typing this at 3:27 a.m. because I woke up to those footsteps again. This time they were closer, right outside my bedroom door, and for the first time I heard something else. A soft tapping on the wood, like long fingers drumming gently. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I haven't slept properly in weeks. I keep all the lights on, but it doesn't help. Whatever this thing is, darkness doesn't seem to matter to it. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this at Pine Haven? Or am I truly losing my mind? I've tried researching local legends, but there's almost nothing online about that specific area. I'm desperate for answers, or at least to know I'm not alone in this. Because right now, as I sit here with my back against the wall and my eyes fixed on my bedroom door, I've never felt more alone in my life. The tapping has stopped, but the footsteps are moving again, circling, always circling. Update. It's barely an hour later, and I swear that same shadow I saw at my tent is now visible under my door. The hallway light is on, but the shadow doesn't make sense. It's too dark, too solid, and it's moving in ways shadows shouldn't. I'm calling a friend to come over. I can't be alone with this anymore. I've been putting off writing about this for months now. I still get chills thinking about it, and there are nights I wake up in a cold sweat, thinking I hear those same sounds from the forest. But I need to get this out. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar or can make sense of what happened to us. Last summer, my 3 best friends and I signed up for what was supposed to be an exciting 5-day wilderness survival challenge in Blackwater Ridge. We're all pretty outdoorsy guys, but none of us had done anything this intense before. I've known Marcus, Tyler, and Derek since college. We try to do something adventurous together at least once a year. The program promised an authentic wilderness experience, navigating difficult terrain, building shelters, finding food and water sources, the whole deal. Our guide, Ethan, was supposed to be this expert outdoorsman with years of experience. He looked the part too, weathered face, confident demeanor, the kind of guy who seemed like he could survive anything. Day 1 started out pretty much as expected. We met at the ranger station early in the morning, checked our gear one last time, and then Ethan drove us to the trailhead in his Jeep. The hike-in was tough, about 6 miles of increasingly difficult terrain. We were following what Ethan called a game trail, but honestly, it looked like no trail at all to me. Just endless forest getting thicker and more remote with every step. "This is proper wilderness," Ethan kept saying. "Most tourists never see this part of Blackwater." He wasn't wrong. By mid-afternoon, we hadn't seen another human being for hours. We reached our base camp around 4 p.m., a small clearing next to a stream. The location was perfect. Water source, relatively flat ground, enough open space for our tents while still having tree cover. Ethan showed us how to set up camp properly, where to store our food safely, and how to prepare for the night. The sun was starting to set when we finished dinner, some basic freeze-dried meals Ethan had brought. That's when things started getting weird. Ethan said he needed to go check something out and would be back in 20 minutes. He grabbed his flashlight and headed into the trees. We didn't think much of it at first. Tyler and I cleaned up from dinner while Marcus and Derek collected more firewood. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. We kept expecting to see Ethan's flashlight bobbing through the trees, but nothing. "Maybe he's scouting tomorrow's route," Derek suggested, but I could tell by his voice he didn't believe it. Why would Ethan scout in the dark? By the time 2 hours had passed, we were legitimately concerned. We tried calling out for him, but there was no response, just the forest sounds, which suddenly seemed a lot louder and more menacing than before. "Should we go look for him?" Marcus asked. "And get lost ourselves?" "Not a great idea," Tyler said. He had the most outdoor experience among us. We agreed to wait until morning if needed, but none of us were happy about it. Ethan had the satellite phone, the detailed maps, and most importantly, the knowledge of where the hell we actually were. I'd like to say we handled it well, but honestly, we were already on edge. Being in the deep wilderness with your guide suddenly vanishing isn't exactly calming. We stayed up late around the fire, talking less and less as the night went on, each of us straining to hear any sound that might be Ethan returning. Around midnight, we decided to take shifts staying awake, just in case. I took the first watch while the others went to their tents. That's when I first noticed the sounds. At first, I thought it was just normal forest noise, branches moving in the wind, maybe some nocturnal animals. But there was something deliberate about it, rhythmic almost, like footsteps circling our camp, staying just beyond where the firelight reached. I called out, thinking maybe Ethan was back but staying at a distance for some reason. "Ethan? That you, man?" The sound stopped immediately, complete silence. Even the normal forest sounds seemed to go quiet. Then a branch snapped loudly about 30 yards to my right. I jerked my head toward the sound, my heart rate spiking. Nothing visible, just darkness beyond the firelight. I woke up Tyler. "I think there's something out there," I whispered. He listened for a few minutes, but the woods had gone completely silent. "Probably just deer," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Tyler agreed to take over the watch early, and I tried to get some sleep. I must have dozed off eventually, but I was woken by Tyler shaking my shoulder roughly. "Get up," he hissed. "Something's messing with our stuff." I scrambled out of the tent. Derek and Marcus were already up, looking freaked out. Our backpacks, which we'd stored under the rain fly of my tent, had been dragged about 15 feet away into the edge of the clearing. The contents were strewn about, and my pack had a long tear down one side. "What the hell?" I said much too loudly. My voice echoed in the quiet forest. "Keep it down," Marcus whispered. "Whatever did this might still be close." We carefully approached our scattered supplies. Most of our food was gone. Protein bars, trail mix, all the freeze-dried meals. Our water purification tablets were missing too. Weirdest of all our maps had been taken. "Bears don't take maps," Derek said, stating what we were all thinking. We spent the next hour gathering what remained of our supplies and moving everything closer to the fire, which Tyler built up to a blaze. None of us suggested going back to sleep. As dawn broke, we did a full inventory of what was left. The situation wasn't good. Most of our food was gone, some of our gear was damaged, and we had no idea where Ethan was. We still had our tents, sleeping bags, and basic tools, but without the maps or Ethan's guidance, we weren't confident about finding our way back to civilization. "We need to try to find Ethan," I said finally. "He's either hurt somewhere or," I didn't finish the sentence, "or whatever took our stuff got him too." Derek completed my thought. We decided to search in a careful pattern around the camp, never letting the fire go out of sight. The morning light made things seem less threatening, but the unease remained. We called Ethan's name every few minutes, but there was never any response. After about an hour of searching, we found nothing. No sign of Ethan, no clues about what happened to our supplies. We returned to camp to regroup and figure out our next move. That's when we discovered our tents had been slashed to ribbons. While we'd been searching the woods, something had returned to our camp and systematically destroyed our shelter. Long, jagged cuts ran through the fabric of all 3 tents. Our sleeping bags had been pulled out and torn apart, synthetic fillings scattered everywhere like snow. "This isn't an animal," Tyler said, his voice shaking. "This is deliberate." The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now. I kept spinning around, convinced I'd catch a glimpse of something, or someone, ducking behind a tree. The others were doing the same thing. We were all breathing fast, on the verge of panic. "We need to get out of here," Marcus said. "Forget finding Ethan. We need to save ourselves." None of us argued. We hastily gathered what useful items remained: a couple of water bottles, a knife, my fire starter kit, and the clothes on our backs. Tyler thought he remembered the general direction back to the trailhead, so that became our plan. Head back the way we came and hope we hit a trail or road eventually. We had just shouldered our meager supplies when Derek froze, pointing to the ground at the edge of our destroyed camp. "Look, footprints, but not like any I'd seen before. They were roughly human-shaped but too large, with what looked like claw marks at the end of each toe impression. They led away from our camp into the densest part of the forest." "We are not following those," Marcus said immediately. "But what if they lead to Ethan?" I asked. We argued briefly, but eventually agreed we had to know. If Ethan was in trouble, we couldn't just abandon him. And if whoever made those prints was responsible for wrecking our camp, maybe confronting them was our only way out of this nightmare. Following the tracks was nerve-wracking. They meandered through the thickest undergrowth, sometimes vanishing completely before reappearing. We lost them entirely at a rocky outcropping, but picked them up again on the other side. About a mile from camp, we entered a small clearing and stopped dead in our tracks. In the center stood a crude structure made of branches, leaves, and what looked like animal hides. It was maybe 6 feet tall and roughly dome-shaped, with a small entrance facing away from us. "What the hell is that?" Derek whispered. "Some kind of shelter," Tyler replied. "Looks man-made, but primitive." The footprints led directly to the entrance. We approached cautiously, ready to run at the first sign of danger. When we were about 10 feet away, we heard it. A muffled thumping from inside. We looked at each other, frozen in indecision. Then came another sound, what could only be a human moan. Tyler grabbed a heavy stick from the ground. I did the same. With silent nods, we approached the entrance together, while Marcus and Derek hung back slightly. I'll never forget what I saw inside that shelter. Ethan was there, bound with some kind of plant fiber ropes, a filthy rag stuffed in his mouth. His eyes went wide when he saw us. He looked like he'd been beaten, one eye swollen shut, dried blood on his temple. We rushed to untie him, constantly glancing over our shoulders, expecting whatever had done this to return any second. Ethan couldn't stop shaking as we removed his gag. "We need to go. Now. Right now," were his first words, his voice hoarse. "What happened? Who did this?" I asked, working on the knots binding his ankles. "I don't know what they are," he said, his voice cracking. "They look almost human, but wrong. I've been guiding in these woods for 12 years and never seen anything like them. They ambushed me last night when I went to check a noise." "How many?" Tyler asked, helping Ethan to his feet. "At least 3, maybe more. They're strong, really strong." He was shaking, looking frantically around the clearing. "They've been coming and going all night. They could be back any minute." We didn't need any more convincing. Supporting Ethan between us, we left the shelter and headed in what we hoped was the direction back to the trailhead. Ethan was limping badly, and we moved slowly, jumping at every sound. "They've been watching your group since we entered their territory," Ethan explained as we walked. "I've heard stories from some of the older guides about strange things in this part of Blackwater, but I always thought they were just trying to scare the newbies." "What do they want?" Marcus asked. Ethan just shook his head. "I don't know. They didn't try to communicate, just dragged me to that shelter and left me there. Came back occasionally to look at me." We'd been walking for about 20 minutes when we heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a kind of hooting call from behind us, immediately answered by similar calls from our left and right. "They're following us," Ethan whispered, "and surrounding us." We picked up our pace as much as Ethan's injuries would allow. The calls continued, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but always keeping pace with us. We were being herded, I realized with growing horror, guided away from escape routes and deeper into unknown territory. Then, just as panic was about to overwhelm us, we heard something else. Human voices. Normal, regular human voices calling out from ahead of us. "Hello? Is someone there?" We shouted back immediately, almost sobbing with relief. The strange calls behind us went silent. A few minutes later, we stumbled into another campsite where a group of 4 hikers were having lunch. They looked startled by our appearance, disheveled, wild-eyed, supporting the injured Ethan between us. "What happened to you guys?" one of them asked, already reaching for a first aid kit. We gave them a sanitized version of events. Our guide had fallen and injured himself, we'd lost our supplies, and needed help getting back to civilization. They were experienced hikers with GPS devices and proper maps. With their help, we began making our way out of Blackwater Ridge. It took us the rest of the day to reach a ranger station. Ethan's injuries were treated, and we gave statements about what had happened. The rangers sent out a search party to our campsite, but they found nothing unusual. No strange shelter, no footprints, not even the remains of our destroyed camp. It was as if the whole thing had never happened. The official report called it a bear encounter, with Ethan's injuries attributed to a fall during a nighttime scout. No one wanted to hear about primitive humanoid creatures stalking us through the forest. Ethan himself backtracked on his initial story, perhaps realizing how it sounded and worried about his guiding reputation. It's been 6 months, and I still don't know what to make of what happened. Sometimes I almost convince myself it was mass hysteria, the stress of being lost in the wilderness making us imagine things. But then I remember Ethan bound in that shelter, the systematic destruction of our camp, those strange footprints, and the inhuman calls as they pursued us through the forest. I haven't spoken to Ethan since that day. He didn't return any of our calls after we got back. The guiding company said he'd taken a leave of absence. Marcus, Tyler, Derek, and I still talk about it sometimes, but less frequently as time passes. We've all been having nightmares, though, and none of us has gone camping since. Whatever's out there in Blackwater Ridge, I hope I never encounter it again. But I can't shake the feeling that we were allowed to escape, that whatever was stalking us could have taken us all if it wanted to. But for some reason, it let us go. And that thought keeps me awake at night, wondering if someday they might change their minds and come looking for us again. Last month, my 3 buddies, Chris, Alex, and Jordan, and I decided we needed a break from city life. We'd been talking about camping for ages. You know, actually disconnecting from technology and experiencing nature for real, not those crowded campgrounds with RVs and screaming kids everywhere. I'd discovered this place called Wildwood Forest about 2 hours outside the city. Online reviews were sparse, which was exactly what we wanted, somewhere untouched. We left early on a Friday morning. The drive was actually pretty great. Windows down, music blasting, joking around like we used to in college. We hadn't all hung out together in months because of work and other commitments. Chris brought his fancy camera to take nature shots, Alex packed way too much food as usual, and Jordan was in charge of navigation, though he kept losing signal as we got further from civilization. When we reached the forest entrance, instead of heading to the designated camping areas, we took this narrow dirt road that branched off, driving until it became too rough for my SUV. Jordan had found a forum post about hidden spots deeper in the forest where rangers rarely patrolled. It seemed perfect. We'd have total privacy. We hiked about a mile carrying our gear until we found this amazing clearing surrounded by massive pine trees. The spot was beautiful, flat ground, a small stream nearby, and far enough from any trails that we wouldn't be disturbed. We spent the afternoon setting up our tents, gathering firewood, and exploring the immediate area. The weather was perfect, cool but not cold, with this amazing golden sunlight filtering through the trees. As the sun started setting, we got a fire going, cracked open some beers, and Alex started cooking these incredible burgers on the portable grill. The stress of work and city life was melting away. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, just the crackling fire, birds chirping, and occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. After dinner, we were sitting around the fire swapping stories and laughing. Chris was telling us about this disaster date he'd been on the previous weekend, and we were all in tears from laughing so hard. It was probably around 10:30 p.m. when I first noticed something odd. There was a sound coming from the trees to our left, not like an animal moving through underbrush, but more deliberate. At first I didn't say anything, thinking maybe it was just a raccoon or something. But then Jordan paused mid-sentence and looked in that direction too. "You guys hear that?" he asked, and we all went quiet. The sounds continued, twigs snapping, leaves crunching, in a rhythm that seemed too consistent for an animal. It sounded like footsteps, human footsteps. "Probably just a deer," Alex said, but he didn't sound convinced. We tried to continue our conversation, but I could tell everyone was distracted now, ears tuned to the forest around us. The footsteps seemed to circle our campsite, moving from one side to another, staying just beyond the reach of our firelight. My heart was beating faster. I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous. We were in a public forest after all. It could be another hiker or camper. Then the footsteps stopped. We all exchanged looks, and I could see the relief washing over their faces. Chris made some joke about Bigfoot, and we laughed, tension breaking momentarily. That's when he appeared. From between two massive pines at the edge of our clearing, a figure stepped into the dim glow of our firelight. It was a man, tall and impossibly thin, like someone who hadn't eaten properly in months. His hair was long, matted and wild, merging with a beard that reached halfway down his chest. Both were streaked with gray. His clothes were filthy, a once brown jacket now black with dirt, and what looked like dried mud, torn jeans, and boots that had clearly seen years of wear. But it was his eyes that made my blood run cold. They were wide open, startlingly pale against his weathered face, and completely vacant. Not vacant like someone who's zoned out. Vacant like someone who's looking at you but seeing something else entirely. He was staring directly at us, but it felt like he was looking through us at the same time. None of us moved. The forest had gone completely silent. No insects, no rustling leaves, nothing except the crackling of our fire. The man stood perfectly still, about 20 feet from our circle, just watching. Jordan was the first to react. "Hey there," he called, his voice forcibly casual. "You out camping too?" The man didn't respond, didn't even blink. Chris cleared his throat. "We've got plenty of food if you're hungry. Want to join us?" I remember thinking how surreal this was, offering dinner to this wild-looking stranger who'd appeared from nowhere. But that's what you do, right? You try to normalize the situation, try to be friendly, because the alternative is acknowledging that something is very, very wrong. For what felt like 5 minutes but was probably only 30 seconds, the man just stood there, staring. Then, without any change in his expression, he took 3 steps forward and stopped again. He was close enough now that I could see the dirt under his fingernails and a long, jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw. "We've got burgers," Alex offered, gesturing to the cooler. His hand was shaking slightly. "Or some chili. It's still warm." The man tilted his head slightly, like a dog trying to understand a strange sound. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Then he moved to the left of our circle, not coming closer but not leaving either, and simply sat down on a fallen log about 15 feet away. We exchanged nervous glances. What do you do in this situation? Tell him to leave? Ignore him? Pack up and go? We were miles from the car, in the dark, and honestly, I wasn't sure if asking him to leave would escalate things. so we tried to continue as normally as possible. Alex served up some chili in a spare bowl and placed it on the log next to the man, who didn't acknowledge it at all. We forced conversation, speaking too loudly and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. The whole time, the man sat motionless, eyes fixed on the fire, the bowl of food untouched beside him. Then he started muttering. It was so quiet at first that I thought I was imagining it, but soon we could all hear it, this continuous stream of whispered words, too low to make out clearly. It wasn't in rhythm or with any pattern I could discern, just constant, almost frantic muttering. I caught fragments. Not supposed to be here. And they'll find. And watching from the trees. Each snippet made the hair on my arms stand up straighter. The muttering continued, growing slightly louder but never becoming fully audible. Sometimes he'd pause, look up suddenly as if hearing something we couldn't, then resume his incomprehensible monologue. Around midnight, things got worse. The man stood up abruptly, making us all jump. He walked to the edge of our firelight, his back to us, and became completely still again. Then he raised one arm and pointed into the darkness of the forest. He held that position for almost a minute, arm outstretched, finger extended toward something none of us could see. When he turned back around, his expression had changed. There was an intensity there now, a focus that was somehow more terrifying than the vacant stare. He looked at each of us in turn, his eyes lingering on our faces as if memorizing them. "It's coming," he said, the first clear words he'd spoken. His voice was raspy, like he rarely used it. "It's coming through the trees. I can't stop it anymore." Then he went back to the log and resumed his muttering, but louder now, more agitated. He began rocking back and forth, hands clutching his knees, nails digging into the fabric of his jeans. I made eye contact with Jordan. He gave me the slightest nod. We needed to leave. We had a silent conversation with our eyes and subtle gestures. We'd pack up gradually, grab only the essentials, and get the hell out of there. No sudden movements. No indication that we were planning to flee. So while Chris kept talking, something about a hiking trip he'd taken last year, his voice strained with fake enthusiasm, the rest of us started moving around the camp, seemingly casually. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed my sleeping bag into it. Alex collected our food and shoved it into his pack. Jordan gathered the car keys and our wallets, distributing them to their owners. The stranger's muttering grew more frantic. "They're in the roots. They're in the soil. They're coming up. They're coming up." He was digging his fingers into the dirt now, scooping up handfuls and letting it run through his fingers, over and over. When his head suddenly snapped up, looking directly at me, I froze. Had he realized what we were doing? But his eyes seemed to be focused on something behind me. He pointed again, this time directly over my shoulder. "She's here," he whispered, and my entire body went cold. I couldn't help it. I turned to look. There was nothing there but darkness and trees. When I turned back, the man had stood up and taken several steps toward our circle. His face was different now. There was a terrible eagerness there. "You brought her," he said, his voice clearer than before. I've been waiting for so long." That was it. Jordan gave the signal, 3 quick taps on his thigh, and we moved. We grabbed our packs and bolted. Didn't bother with the tents, the grill, any of it. Just took our backpacks and ran toward the trail. I heard a sound behind us, not footsteps chasing us, but a terrible, high-pitched laugh that echoed through the trees. We ran with our flashlights bobbing wildly, stumbling over roots and rocks. I kept expecting to feel hands grabbing me from behind, but the only sounds were our own panicked breathing and footsteps. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. Jordan fumbled with the keys, and we piled in, doors locking immediately. As we drove away, headlights cutting through the darkness of the forest road, no one spoke. We were all breathing hard, processing what had just happened. It wasn't until we hit the main highway that Alex finally broke the silence. "What the actual fuck was that?" he whispered. None of us had an answer. We drove straight back to the city, arriving at around 3 a.m. We crashed at my place, none of us wanting to be alone. In the morning, in the safety of daylight and civilization, we tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe he was just a homeless guy living in the woods. Maybe he had mental health issues. Maybe he was on drugs. But none of those explanations accounted for the absolute dread I felt in his presence, or that look in his eyes when he said, "She's here." I keep thinking about what would have happened if we'd stayed. What was coming through the trees? Who was the she he was talking about? We filed a report with the local sheriff's department when we got back, describing the man and the location. The deputy took our information but didn't seem particularly concerned. "Probably just a drifter," he said. "We get them in the national forest sometimes." 3 weeks later, I got a call from the sheriff's office. They'd gone out to the area and found our abandoned campsite. Our tents were still there, but they'd been slashed to ribbons. The weird thing is, they found no signs of the man we described. No footprints other than our own. No evidence anyone else had been there at all. I still don't sleep well. I keep seeing those vacant eyes, hearing that whispered, "She's here." Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, absolutely certain there's someone standing at the foot of my bed, pointing at something behind me that I can't see. I don't know what we encountered in those woods. All I know is that when I think about how close we came to staying the night, I feel physically sick. Something was very wrong with that man, and something was very wrong in that forest. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it hasn't forgotten us.